She had one chance to save the man who would destroy her family, or let him fall and remain a ghost forever. Tonight, beneath crystal chandeliers and behind a silver mask, Elara Vance would break 5 years of silence. One warning, one dance, one duke who didn't know her brother had already signed his death warrant. If she succeeded, she'd become a traitor to her own blood. If she failed, an innocent man would lose everything, and she'd disappear back into the shadows where disgraced noblewomen belonged. Stay with me until the end to see how far courage can take a woman with nothing left to lose. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The ballroom smelled like expensive lies. Elara pressed her spine against the marble column, counting her heartbeats, watching the glittering crowd through the eye holes of her silver mask. Somewhere in this ocean of silk and jewels stood Darien Wolfe, Duke of Northmore, a man she'd never met but whose face she'd memorized from her brother's study 3 nights ago. Dark hair, scar along his left jaw, eyes that reportedly cut through bullshit like a blade through butter. She had maybe 10 minutes before someone recognized her walk, her hands, the way she held her champagne glass. 5 years away from this world hadn't been enough to erase muscle memory. "Another toast!" Lord Pemberton's voice boomed across the hall. "To prosperity, to partnership, to the future." To theft, Elara thought bitterly. To fraud. To my brother's brilliant plan to rob a good man blind and call it business. She shouldn't be here. Coming back to Vance Hall, even masked, even as a ghost, was monumentally stupid. But when she'd found those documents in Adrian's office, when she'd realized what he intended to do, something in her chest had cracked open. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was just 5 years of swallowing her family's poison finally coming back up. The musicians struck up a waltz. And there, cutting through the crowd like he owned gravity itself, was Darien Wolfe. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never having to apologize for existing. Tall, broad-shouldered in his perfectly tailored black coat, the scar on his jaw caught the candlelight as he declined a dance from some earl's daughter with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elara's hands went cold. Now or never. She pushed off the column, abandoned her champagne on a servant's tray, and walked straight toward him before her courage could collapse. Her dress, borrowed from a friend who still believed in her, whispered against the floor. Midnight blue silk. Simple compared to the peacock displays around her, but that was the point. Don't stand out. Don't be remembered. Just deliver the warning and vanish. Darien turned as she approached, and for one terrible second, his gray eyes locked onto hers through the mask. Something flickered in his expression, curiosity, maybe, or suspicion, but he didn't step back when she stopped in front of him. "Dance with me," Elara said. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. His eyebrow lifted. "Do I know you?" "No, but you will in about 3 days when your fortune disappears." That got his attention. His expression went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence or brilliant strategy. She couldn't tell which. Around them, couples spun and laughed, completely oblivious to the fact that she'd just detonated a bomb in the middle of small talk. "That's quite an opening line," Darien said softly. "Should I be calling for security, or are you actually about to say something useful?" "Dance with me," Elara repeated, "unless you want your business partners overhearing what I know about the Iron Ridge merger." His jaw tightened. Iron Ridge, the northern mining operation that was supposed to triple his wealth and cement his family's legacy for generations. The deal her brother had spent 6 months poisoning from the inside. Darien's hand found hers. "One dance," he said. "Then you explain everything, or I find out who you are and why you're wasting my time with cryptic threats." He pulled her onto the floor before she could respond. The waltz swallowed them immediately. His hand settled against her waist, firm, steady, impersonal. She forced herself to follow his lead, to remember the steps her governess had drilled into her a lifetime ago. 1, 2, 3. Oh, I'm angry. 1, 2, 3. Smile like this is normal, like her heart isn't trying to break through her ribs. "Talk," Darien said. They swept past a cluster of laughing nobles. His voice stayed low, conversational. To anyone watching, they looked like polite strangers making pleasant small talk. Elara's mouth went dry. "The contracts you signed last month. The mining rights. Your partners, what about them?" "They're fraudulent. Not the documents themselves, those are real, But the men who brokered the deal, they don't represent the landowners. They're con artists. And in 3 days, the actual owners are going to surface with proof that you bought rights to land that was never for sale. Darian's grip on her waist tightened slightly. Not painful, just focused, like he was reassessing every assumption he'd made about this conversation. And you know this how? Because the man who orchestrated the entire scheme is my brother. The words hung between them like smoke. Darian's steps didn't falter, but something shifted in his expression, calculation replacing curiosity. He spun her through a turn, and when they came back together, his eyes were locked on her face like he was trying to read her soul through the mask. Your brother, he repeated slowly. Adrian Vance. Elara's stomach dropped. You know him. Everyone knows him. Charming bastard. Threw a hell of a party at the Rosewood Club last spring. Darian's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. So either you're setting me up for something even more elaborate, or you just committed treason against your own family. Which is it? Does it matter? It matters if I'm about to waste resources chasing a fairy tale. The music swelled around them. Elara caught a glimpse of her reflection in one of the gilt mirrors lining the walls. A woman in blue silk and a silver mask, dancing with a man who could destroy what was left of her life with one word to the right people. The Pemberton account, she said quietly. Check the timestamps on the transfer authorizations. They were backdated. And the survey reports from the Northern Ridge, the ones claiming iron deposits, half those coordinates don't exist. Your geologist never actually visited the sites. Someone paid him to fabricate the data. Darian's expression didn't change, but his hand shifted against her back, a tiny movement that told her he was listening, really listening. Why are you telling me this? The question she'd been dreading. Elara met his eyes. Because in 3 days you're going to lose everything. Your fortune, your reputation, probably your title when the creditors come calling. And my brother is going to buy up the pieces for nothing and sell them back to the real landowners at a profit. He'll be a hero. You'll be a cautionary tale about northern dukes who got too greedy. And you're warning me out of the goodness of your heart. I'm warning you because I'm tired of watching my family destroy people. The confession came out rawer than she'd intended. Darian's eyes narrowed, studying her face like she was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. The waltz was ending. She could hear the final crescendo building in the strings. Who are you? He asked again. Elara pulled back slightly, preparing to disappear the moment the music stopped. Someone who doesn't exist anymore. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. The final note rang out. Couples around them broke apart, applauding politely. Elara stepped out of Darian's arms and turned toward the nearest exit. His hand caught her wrist. Not hard, not threatening, just steady, grounding her in place when every instinct screamed to run. If what you're saying is true, Darian said quietly, I need proof. Names, documents, something more than a masked stranger's word. You won't find proof. Adrian's too smart for that. But if you move fast, if you pull out of Iron Ridge now, tonight, you can minimize the damage. Call it cold feet, renegotiate, stall until you can verify the claims independently. And if I don't, then in 72 hours, you'll wish you'd listened to the masked stranger. She pulled her wrist free and walked. Not running, running would draw attention, but moving with the kind of purpose that made people step aside without thinking. Through the crowd, past the champagne tables, toward the servants' corridor that led to the garden exit. Behind her, she felt Darian stare like a hand between her shoulder blades. She didn't look back. The garden was blessedly empty. Elara made it 3 steps past the hedgerow before her knees went weak and she had to grab a stone bench for support. Her hands were shaking. Her mask felt like it was suffocating her. I did it. I actually did it. And now there was no going back. If Darian investigated and found the truth, Adrian would know someone had talked. He'd tear apart his inner circle looking for the leak, and when he couldn't find it there, he'd start looking at old connections, old debts, old sisters he'd exiled for refusing to play his games. Elara ripped off the mask and sucked in a breath of cold night air. 5 years. 5 years since Adrian had given her the choice, participate in the family business or disappear. She'd chosen disappearance, a small apartment in the merchant district, a job teaching music to merchant children, A life so quiet and unremarkable that even her own reflection sometimes forgot who she used to be. But apparently, conscience had a longer memory than common sense. "Well," a voice said from the shadows. "That was interesting." Elara spun, heart in her throat. Darian Wolf stepped out from behind a topiary shaped like a swan. He'd followed her. Of course he'd followed her, because apparently tonight's theme was Elara makes catastrophically bad decisions. "You move fast for someone in heels," he observed. His tone was conversational, but his eyes were doing that calculation thing again, measuring, assessing, cataloging every detail. "You shouldn't be out here," Elara said. "If someone sees us together, they'll think I'm charming a pretty stranger in the garden. It's a tale as old as time." He moved closer, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, but there was nothing relaxed about the way he watched her. "You took off your mask. So did you. I'm not the one hiding. Aren't you?" Elara lifted her chin. "The great Northern Duke pretending he doesn't know his fortune is about to collapse. Sounds like hiding to me." A smile ghosted across his mouth. Not friendly, too sharp for that, but interested. "You've got bite. I like that." He tilted his head. "Elara Vance. That's your name, isn't it? Adrian's disgraced little sister who disappeared 5 years ago after some scandal involving a married baron and a forged letter." Ice slid down her spine. That story was a lie. Most good scandals are. He studied her face. "But it served its purpose. Made you disappear. Made everyone forget Adrian even had a sister." He paused. "Convenient timing, wasn't it? Right when he was consolidating power." Elara's throat went tight. "You need to forget you saw me." "Too late for that." "I'm serious. So am I." Darian's expression shifted, losing the predatory edge and gaining something colder, more businesslike. "You just handed me information that could save or destroy me, depending on whether you're telling the truth. Do you really think I'm going to let you vanish without understanding what game we're playing? This isn't a game. Everything is a game. The only question is whether you're a player or a piece." The words hit harder than they should have. Elara had spent 5 years as a piece, moved around by her brother's plans, by society's expectations, by her own fear. She'd forgotten what it felt like to make a choice that mattered. "I gave you the warning," she said quietly. "What you do with it is your decision. And what do you get out of this? Peace of mind, maybe." "Bullshit." Darian's voice was flat. "Nobody risks everything for peace of mind. You want something. Revenge on your brother? Protection? A cut of whatever I salvage? I want to sleep at night knowing I tried to stop him." The honesty seemed to catch him off guard. He blinked, reassessing again, and for just a second the calculated mask slipped and she saw something else underneath. Someone who understood being trapped by family, by legacy, by the weight of a name that came with strings attached. "If I investigate this," Darian said slowly, "and it turns out you're right, your brother is going to know someone talked. He'll come after you." "I know. He could destroy what's left of your reputation. Make sure you never work again. Maybe worse." "I know that too. And you're still here, warning me. Why?" Elara looked at him, really looked at him. Not the Duke, not the scar or the sharp eyes or the reputation for ruthlessness. Just the man who'd been about to lose everything because her brother was good at what he did. "Because someone should," she said simply. The silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the ballroom, the orchestra started another waltz. Laughter drifted through the open windows, light and careless, and completely disconnected from the conversation happening in the dark garden. Darian's jaw worked. "I'm going to investigate," he said finally, quietly. "If you're lying, if this is some elaborate setup, I will burn down everything you care about. Understood?" "Understood. And if you're telling the truth," he trailed off, looking at her like he was solving an equation that didn't quite balance, "then we're going to have another conversation, a longer one, about what happens next." "There is no next. I gave you the warning. That's the end of it." "You really believe that?" Elara wanted to say yes, wanted to believe she could walk away from this moment and slip back into her quiet, invisible life. But the way Darian was looking at her, like she'd just kicked open a door neither of them could close, made her stomach twist with something that felt dangerously like hope. I should go, she said instead. Probably. But he didn't move, didn't stop blocking her path. Are you going to let me leave? Are you going to tell me how to contact you? No. Didn't think so. Darian finally stepped aside, giving her a clear route to the garden gate. But before she could move, he added, For what it's worth. Thank you. However this plays out, you did a brave thing tonight. Elara's chest tightened. Brave or stupid? Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. That's the truth. She walked past him, her borrowed dress whispering against the stone path. She made it 5 steps before his voice stopped her one more time. Elara. She turned. Darian's expression was unreadable in the shadows. If your brother finds out you warned me, if things get dangerous, don't try to handle it alone. Find me. Why would you help me? Because, he said quietly, I pay my debts. Then he turned and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving her alone in the garden with her racing heart and the growing certainty that she'd just set something in motion that was going to change everything. Chits. Elara made it home just after midnight. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted townhouse in the Merchant District. 2 rooms, a shared washroom down the hall, and a window that overlooked a bakery. It smelled like bread and loneliness and safety. She'd built this life one careful brick at a time, staying invisible, staying quiet, staying out of her family's orbit. And tonight she'd thrown it all away for a stranger in a ballroom. She dropped the silver mask on her rickety table and sank into the chair by the window. Her hands were still shaking. The adrenaline that had carried her through the evening was draining away, leaving behind exhaustion and the cold creep of fear. What did I just do? Adrian was going to find out. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. He always found out. That's what made him dangerous. Not his cruelty, but his patience. His ability to smile and wait and strike when you'd forgotten he was even watching. A knock at the door made her jump. Elara's heart slammed into her throat. Too soon. It was too soon for consequences. Unless Darian had followed her home, unless he'd... Elara? It's me. Cora's voice. Thank the stars. Elara opened the door to find her friend standing in the hallway, still wearing the emerald gown she'd lent Elara for the ball, which meant Cora had somehow changed in a moving carriage because there was no way she'd gotten home and back this fast. You're alive, Cora said, pushing past her into the apartment. I wasn't sure you'd make it out without someone recognizing you. I made it out. Elara closed the door and leaned against it. Barely. Did you talk to him, the Duke? I did. And I have no idea if he believed me. Elara rubbed her face. He might investigate. He might think I'm insane. He might decide I'm part of some bigger scheme and come after me anyway. Cora sat down on the bed, the only other piece of furniture in the room, and kicked off her shoes. But you warned him. That's what matters, right? You did what you could. Maybe. Definitely. Cora gave her a hard look. You can't save everyone, Elle, especially not from your brother. You tried that once, remember? It didn't end well. The reminder stung. 5 years ago, Elara had tried to expose one of Adrian's cons, a scheme to defraud a widow out of her late husband's estate. She'd gathered evidence, written letters, gone to the authorities, and Adrian had crushed her so thoroughly that by the time he was done, she'd been the one facing criminal charges for forgery and slander. The charges had disappeared when she'd agreed to disappear with them. This is different, Elara said quietly. How? Because this time I'm not trying to stop him. I'm just giving someone else a chance to protect themselves. Cora's expression softened. You know he's going to retaliate when he finds out. I know. And you're okay with that? Elara looked out the window at the dark street below. Somewhere across the city, Darian Wolfe was probably tearing apart contracts, checking timestamps, calling in favors. Or maybe he'd dismissed her warning entirely and gone to bed thinking she was just another lunatic with a grudge. Either way, the dice were already rolling. No, she admitted. I'm not okay with it, but I did it anyway. Cora stood and pulled her into a hug, quick and fierce, and smelling like rosewater perfume. You're either the bravest person I know or the most self-destructive. I haven't decided which. Can it be both? Probably is. Cora pulled back, hands on Elara's shoulders. Listen to me. If things go sideways, If your brother comes sniffing around, you come to me. You don't face him alone. Got it? Got it. I'm serious, Elle. I know. Thank you. Cora squeezed her shoulders once more, then grabbed her shoes and headed for the door. She paused on the threshold, looking back with an expression Elara couldn't quite read. For what it's worth, Cora said. I think the Duke is lucky you warned him. Not many people would stick their neck out like that. Then she was gone, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Elara locked the door and leaned against it, staring at the silver mask on the table. In the candlelight, it looked like something from a dream, or a nightmare. Hard to tell which. She should sleep, should try to forget this night ever happened and go back to her quiet, careful existence. But when she closed her eyes, all she could see was Darian Wolf's gray stare cutting through her mask, his voice asking, "Why are you telling me this?" And her own answer, raw and true, because someone should. Tomorrow, she'd deal with the consequences. Tonight, she'd let herself believe she'd done the right thing, even if it destroyed her. 3 days of silence felt like 3 years. Elara kept her head down, taught her music lessons, and waited for the hammer to fall. Every footstep in the hallway made her flinch. Every knock on the door sent her heart into her throat. But nothing happened. No angry brother, no vengeful Duke, just the slow grind of ordinary days pretending to be normal. Until the 4th morning, when Adrian's footman showed up at her door. "Miss Vance?" the man said, his voice cold and professional. "Your brother requests your presence at the family residence. Immediately." Elara's coffee cup froze halfway to her mouth. I'm not part of the family anymore." Nevertheless, the carriage is waiting downstairs. It wasn't a request. They both knew it. 20 minutes later, Elara stood in Adrian's study, the same room where she'd found the documents about Darian's impending ruin. Her brother sat behind his mahogany desk, fingers steepled, expression pleasant as poison. "Elara," he said warmly, "it's been too long." "Not long enough." She stayed near the door, ready to bolt. "What do you want?" Adrian smiled. He'd always had a good smile. Charming, disarming, the kind that made people trust him right before he destroyed them. Can a brother simply miss his sister? No? Fair enough. He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a chess piece he was considering moving. I'll be direct then. 4 days ago, the Duke of Northmore pulled out of the Iron Ridge merger, quite suddenly, citing concerns about the validity of the land surveys. Elara's stomach turned to ice, but she kept her face blank. And it's curious timing. We were hours away from closing the deal, hours from watching him sign papers that would have bankrupted him. Adrian's smile didn't waver. Then someone whispered in his ear, someone who knew exactly what questions to ask. Maybe he's smarter than you thought. Maybe. Adrian stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. Or maybe someone at the summit ball decided to play hero. A masked woman, witnesses say, danced with the Duke, then vanished. No one got a good look at her face, but he stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Expensive, suffocating. Several people mentioned her dress, midnight blue silk, simple cut, borrowed perhaps from a friend who still believes in lost causes. Her mouth went dry. Adrian's hand shot out and gripped her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to make his point. Was it you? Elara jerked back, breaking his hold. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. You were always terrible at it. His voice dropped to something colder. I have 3 witnesses who saw you leaving through the garden. One of my men followed you home. So let's skip the part where you pretend to be innocent and move to the part where you explain why you sabotaged 6 months of my work. The room felt too small, too hot. Elara backed up until her shoulders hit the bookshelf. Because it was wrong. He didn't deserve what you were planning. Deserve? Adrian laughed, sharp and humorless. You think this is about deserve? It's business, Elara. I found an opportunity and I took it. That's how the world works. By destroying people. By winning. He moved closer again, caging her against the shelves. Do you have any idea how much money I lost when Wolf pulled out? How many investors are now questioning my judgment? You didn't just warn him. You made me look like a fool. Good. The slap came fast. Not brutal, but enough to snap her head sideways and fill her mouth with the taste of copper. Elara's hand flew to her cheek, eyes stinging with shock and rage. Adrian looked at his palm like he was surprised it had moved. Then he lowered it, expression settling back into cold calculation. You're going to fix this. Go to hell. You're going to accept an invitation to visit your dear friend Cora, who happens to be hosting a house party this week at her family's estate. Coincidentally, the Duke of Northmore will be attending. Adrian's smile returned, sharp as broken glass. You'll get close to him, earn his trust, and you'll feed me information about his next moves so I can stay 3 steps ahead. Elara's laugh came out strangled. You want me to spy on him after I just warned him about you? I want you to clean up your mess. Unless you'd prefer I have a conversation with the authorities about that forged letter scandal from 5 years ago, the one we quietly buried. I still have the evidence, you know. Original documents with your handwriting all over them. The threat landed like a punch. Those were fake. You know they were fake. Do I? Because I have a very detailed written confession with your signature on it. Strange what people will sign when they're desperate to avoid prison. He tilted his head. Of course, if you prefer to test the legal system's memory, we can go that route. But I suspect you'll find judges are less forgiving the second time around. Her hands clenched into fists. Why should I help you?
Because
if you don't, I'll destroy what's left of your life. Your teaching job? Gone. Your pathetic little apartment? Evicted. Your friend Cora? His voice went soft and vicious. I'll make sure everyone knows she's been harboring a convicted forger. Her family will disown her within a week. You bastard! I prefer pragmatist. Adrian stepped back, giving her space to breathe. The house party starts tomorrow. You'll accept Cora's invitation, which should arrive within the hour, and you'll go. You'll befriend the Duke. You'll make him believe you're harmless, and you'll report back to me every single thing he says, does, or plans. And if I refuse, then everyone you care about suffers, starting with Cora. He returned to his desk, sitting down like the conversation was already over. You have until this evening to decide. Choose wisely, little sister. Elara's legs felt like water. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to tell him exactly where he could shove his threats. But she'd played this game before. She knew how it ended. Adrian always won because he was willing to burn everything down to get what he wanted. I hate you, she whispered. I know. He didn't look up from his papers. The carriage will return for your answer at sunset. Don't keep it waiting. Cora's invitation arrived exactly when Adrian said it would. Elara sat on her bed, staring at the cream-colored card with its elegant script inviting her to a week-long gathering at Thornwick Manor. A dozen guests, music, dancing, cards. The kind of mindless entertainment the wealthy used to pretend their lives had meaning. And somewhere in that crowd would be Darian Wolfe. This is insane, she said aloud to her empty apartment. I can't do this. But what choice did she have? If she refused, Adrian would destroy Cora. He'd do it slowly, methodically, turning her friend's name into mud until no decent family would acknowledge her. And Cora didn't deserve that, didn't deserve to pay for Elara's choices. A knock at the door made her jump, again. She was getting really tired of jumping. But this time it wasn't Adrian's footman. It was a different messenger, younger, wearing Wolfe family colors. Miss Vance? The boy looked nervous. I have a letter for you, from the Duke of Northmore. He said it was urgent. Elara's heart stopped. She took the sealed envelope with shaking hands, tipped the messenger, and closed the door before breaking the wax seal. The handwriting was sharp and efficient. Miss Vance, you were right. Everything you said was true. I've pulled out of the Iron Ridge deal and begun investigating the fraud. Several men are going to face serious consequences. I owe you a debt. If you need protection, or if your brother retaliates, send word. I meant what I said in the garden. Respectfully, D. Wolfe. Elara read it 3 times, her mind racing. Darian knew. He'd investigated and found the truth, which meant Adrian's plan had already failed, which meant her brother was going to be furious, more furious than he'd already been this morning. And now he wanted her to spy on the man who'd just proven she was right to warn him. Perfect, she muttered. Just perfect. She burned Darian's letter in the candle flame, watching the paper curl and blacken. Evidence. Adrian had taught her that lesson well. Never leave evidence. Then she sat down and wrote 2 letters of her own. The first went to Cora. I'm accepting your invitation. Thank you for thinking of me. I'll arrive tomorrow afternoon. The second went to Adrian. I'll do it. But after this, we're done. You never contact me again. She sent both letters before she could change her mind. Then she packed a small trunk, trying not to think about how badly this was going to end. Spying on a duke who'd already proven he was smarter than her brother thought. Lying to a man who'd offered her protection. Walking into a house full of nobles who would remember her scandal if she gave them half a reason to look closely. This wasn't just dangerous. This was suicidal. But Cora's safety hung in the balance. And Elara had learned a long time ago that she'd sacrifice almost anything to protect the people she loved, even if it meant becoming exactly what her brother wanted, a liar, a spy, and a traitor. Thornwick Manor rose from the countryside like something out of a storybook, all golden stone and climbing ivy and windows that caught the afternoon sun. Cora's family had owned it for generations, and they'd maintained it with the kind of obsessive care that only came from having more money than sense. Elara's carriage rolled up the drive just after lunch. Other guests were already arriving, stepping out of elegant coaches in their fine clothes, laughing and calling to each other like this was the social event of the season. She recognized a few faces. Lord and Lady Pemberton, the Hartley sisters, Marcus Thorne, whose father owned half the shipping routes in the kingdom, and there, standing near the entrance talking to Cora's father, was Darian Wolfe. He looked different in daylight, less predatory, more solid, real. His dark coat fit him perfectly, and when he laughed at something Lord Thornwick said, the sound was genuine, warm, nothing like the calculated duke from the ballroom. Elara's stomach twisted. She climbed out of her carriage before her courage could fail, smoothing her simple travel dress and trying to look like she belonged here. Cora spotted her immediately and came rushing over, pulling her into a hug that felt more like a rescue. "You came," Cora whispered. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I." "Did Adrian? Is he the reason you're here?" Elara pulled back, forcing a smile. "Let's not talk about him. I'm here to enjoy your party and pretend I'm a normal person for a week." Cora's eyes said she didn't believe that for a second, but she was kind enough not to push. "Well, come on then. Let me introduce you to everyone. Or reintroduce you, I suppose, since most of them probably remember. The scandal, I know." Elara squared her shoulders. "It's fine. Ancient history." It wasn't fine, and it definitely wasn't ancient history, but Cora took her arm anyway and led her toward the entrance. They made it halfway across the gravel drive before Darian's voice stopped them. "Miss Vance." Elara turned, her prepared smile freezing on her face. Darian was walking toward them, hands in his pockets, expression carefully neutral. But his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, locked onto hers with the kind of focus that made her feel like every secret she'd ever kept was written across her forehead. "Your Grace," she managed. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. "What a pleasant surprise." "Is it?" One eyebrow lifted slightly. "I had the impression you'd prefer to avoid me after our last conversation." Cora looked between them, confusion flickering across her face. "You two know each other?" "We met briefly," Darian said, still watching Elara. "At a ball. Shared a dance." "How lovely," Cora said brightly, clearly sensing the tension and trying to smooth it over. "Well, I'm sure you'll have plenty of time to catch up this week. We have cards tonight, and tomorrow there's a hunt. I'd like to speak with Miss Vance privately," Darian interrupted, "if she's willing." Every instinct screamed at Elara to refuse, to run, to do anything except follow this man who already suspected her family was poison. But Adrian's threat hung over her like a noose, and if she was going to sell her soul, she might as well get started. "Of course," she heard herself say. "Lead the way, Your Grace. Go." Darian led her to a small library on the second floor, all leather-bound books and afternoon sunlight slanting through tall windows. He closed the door behind them and turned to face her, arms crossed. "You want to explain what you're doing here?" Elara's carefully constructed composure cracked slightly. "I was invited. Cora's my friend. Cora invited you 4 days ago, according to the guest list, right after I pulled out of Iron Ridge." His voice was flat, detective-like. "Coincidence? Maybe. Try again." She wanted to lie, should lie. But standing in front of him, looking at the scar on his jaw and the intelligence in his eyes and the rigid set of his shoulders that said he was ready for a fight, She found she couldn't quite manage it. "My brother sent me," she said quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Darian's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture, a kind of settling, like he'd been expecting this answer but hoping he was wrong. "To spy on me." "Yes." "And you agreed to do it." "He didn't give me a choice." "There's always a choice." "Not when he's threatening to destroy everyone I care about." The words came out sharper than intended. Elara pressed her fingers against the bridge of her nose, trying to hold herself together. "He has evidence from my old scandal. Forged, obviously, but damning enough to send me to prison if he decides to use it. And if I refuse to help him, he'll make sure my friend pays the price." Darian moved to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens. "So you warned me at the ball, saved me from bankruptcy. And now you're here to undo all that good work by feeding your brother information." "I don't want to." "But you will anyway." "I don't know." Elara's voice cracked. I came here thinking I could pretend. Play the spy. Feed Adrian useless information and hope he doesn't notice. But you deserve better than that. You deserve to know." He turned to look at her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The library felt too small, too intimate, like the walls were pressing in. "Why tell me?" Darian asked finally. "You could have just played your part. I might not have figured it out." "Maybe, but I'm tired of lying." She met his eyes. "And you helped me. You investigated. You pulled out. You believed me when you had no reason to. That matters. So what do you want from me now? Forgiveness? Permission to sell me out?" "I want—" She stopped, the truth lodging in her throat like glass. "I want you to help me find a way out of this that doesn't destroy everyone I love." Darian laughed, short and humorless. "That's asking a lot from someone whose fortune you just tried to save and spy on in the same week." "I know. Your brother is going to expect results, information, proof that you're doing what he asked. I know that too. And if you don't deliver, he'll follow through on his threats." Elara nodded, her throat too tight for words. Darian walked back toward her, stopping close enough that she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. The same expression from the garden, like he was solving a puzzle that kept changing shape. "I have a proposition," he said slowly. "I'm listening. You want to protect your friend. I want to destroy your brother. Those goals aren't mutually exclusive." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "We form an alliance. You feed Adrian information, but it's information I control. False trails, dead ends. Enough to keep him satisfied while we build a real trap." Elara's breath caught. "You want me to be a double agent? I want you to choose a side. Really choose this time. Not because you're being threatened, but because you want to stop him." His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, something hungry. "Your brother thinks he's untouchable, that he can manipulate people without consequences. Let's prove him wrong. If he finds out I'm working against him, he won't. Not if we're careful. And if we're not careful, then we both lose." Darian's smile was sharp. "But at least we'll lose together. And personally, I'd rather go down fighting than let your brother think he won." Elara's mind raced. This was insane. More insane than warning Darian in the first place. Double-crossing Adrian didn't just risk her own safety. It risked Cora's, and everyone else caught in the blast radius when her brother inevitably figured it out. But the alternative was becoming Adrian's puppet, helping him destroy a good man, living with the knowledge that she'd had a chance to fight back and chosen cowardice instead. "What would I have to do?" she asked. "Keep him convinced you're on his side. Report back regularly, but only what I tell you to report. Help me understand how he thinks, what he wants, where he's vulnerable." Darian's eyes narrowed. "And most importantly, trust me, because the moment you start second-guessing this alliance, we're both dead. Trust." The word felt foreign. Elara hadn't trusted anyone except Cora in 5 years, and that trust had been earned through countless small moments of loyalty. Darian was asking her to hand over that same faith after one dance and a handful of conversations. But he'd investigated her warning. He'd believed her. He'd offered protection. And right now, he was the only person standing between her and complete destruction. "Okay," she said. "I'm in." "Just like that?" "Just like that." She straightened her spine, forcing steel into her voice. "But if you betray me, if you use this against me or Cora, I will find a way to make you regret it. Darian's smile turned genuine, almost impressed. There's that bite again. Good. I was worried the ball was a fluke. He pushed off the desk and extended his hand. We have a deal then. You and me against your bastard of a brother. Elara took his hand. His grip was firm, steady, grounding. Against Adrian, she agreed. Now, we just need to figure out what lies to feed him first. They spent the next hour planning. Darian pulled out a notebook and sketched a rough timeline of Adrian's known business dealings. Elara filled in the gaps, names, dates, patterns she'd noticed during her brief time living under her brother's roof. It felt strange, clinical even, to dissect her family's corruption like this. But with every detail she shared, she felt lighter, like she was cutting threads that had been strangling her for years. He'll want proof, she said, studying Darian's notes. Not just my word. He'll expect letters, documents, something concrete. Then we'll give him documents, fake ones that lead him exactly where we want. Darian tapped his pen against the page. What's his next target? After Iron Ridge failed, where would he pivot? Elara thought back to the conversation she'd overheard, the papers scattered across Adrian's desk. Shipping routes. He was talking about investing in a new trade company, something about southern ports and exclusive contracts. Thornfield shipping? Maybe. I didn't catch all the details. Darian's expression sharpened. That's Marcus Thorne's father's company. Marcus is here this week. So? So your brother sends you to spy on me, but maybe the real target is Marcus. Maybe Iron Ridge was just one piece of a bigger game. He stood, pacing now. If Adrian can get insider information about Thornfield's contracts, he could undercut their bids, steal their clients, drive them toward bankruptcy, and buy up the company for nothing. Elara's stomach sank. That's exactly what he'd do. Then we use it. You tell Adrian you've gotten close to Marcus, that he's drunk and careless and spilling family secrets. Feed him false information about Thornfield's upcoming deals. Let him make moves based on bad intelligence. And when those moves fail, he'll blame Marcus for lying to you, or he'll think his own sources were wrong. Either way, it buys us time. Darian stopped pacing and looked at her. Can you do that? Lie to your brother convincingly enough that he doesn't suspect? Could she? Elara had spent 5 years lying, to herself, to her students, to anyone who asked about her past. But lying to Adrian was different. He knew her tells, her weaknesses. He'd spent their entire childhood learning how to read her. I'll have to, she said. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. A knock at the door interrupted them. Cora's voice filtered through. Elara, are you in there? Dinner's in an hour and Mother wants everyone to dress. Darian moved to the door and opened it, giving Cora his most charming smile. My apologies, Lady Thornwick. I was monopolizing your friend's time. We were just catching up. Cora's eyes flicked between them, suspicion and curiosity warring on her face. Of course. Well, I'll leave you to it. Elara, your room is ready whenever you're done. Catching up. I'll be there shortly, Elara promised. Cora hesitated, then left, her footsteps fading down the hallway. Darian closed the door again. She doesn't trust me. Can you blame her? I show up after 5 years of hiding, and suddenly I'm in a locked library with a duke who has a reputation for ruthlessness. Fair point. He returned to the desk, gathering his notes. We should establish communication protocols. How often your brother expects updates. How we'll coordinate stories without raising suspicion. He'll want daily reports, letters, probably, sent through his footman. Then we'll write them together, every morning before breakfast. You dictate what he needs to hear, I'll make sure it serves our purposes. Darian looked at her seriously. This only works if we're completely synchronized. One wrong detail, and the whole thing collapses. The weight of what they were attempting settled over Elara like a heavy coat. They were declaring war on Adrian Vance, a man who'd built an empire on manipulation and stayed 3 steps ahead of everyone who'd ever tried to stop him. And their weapons were lies, misdirection, and a fragile alliance between a disgraced noblewoman and a duke with trust issues. We're going to fail, she said quietly. Aren't we? Darian's smile was grim. Probably. But we're going to make him work for it. Somehow, that was more comforting than false reassurance would have been. I should go, Elara said, moving toward the door. Before Cora sends a search party, Elara. She turned. Darian's expression had softened slightly, losing some of its sharp edges. Thank you for telling me the truth. You could have just played spy, and I would have walked right into whatever trap your brother set. That took courage. Or stupidity. Like I said before, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. He paused. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Even if the circumstances are a disaster. Something warm and dangerous unfurled in Elara's chest. She pushed it down hard. No room for feelings, not when they were about to walk a tightrope with her brother holding the scissors. See you at dinner, Your Grace. Darian, he corrected. If we're going to be co-conspirators, you might as well use my name. Darian, she repeated. It felt strange on her tongue. Intimate. See you at dinner. She left before he could say anything else that might make this alliance feel like something more than strategic necessity. Dinner was a glittering, excruciating affair. Cora's mother had outdone herself with the menu, 7 courses, each more elaborate than the last. The dining room sparkled with candlelight and crystal. Conversation flowed like wine, touching on politics, fashion, the upcoming hunting season. Elara sat between Marcus Thorne and one of the Hartley sisters, playing the role of charming guest, while her mind spun through scenarios. Across the table, Darian caught her eye once, a brief flicker of acknowledgement before returning to his conversation with Lord Pemberton. Miss Vance, Marcus said, refilling her wine glass. Cora mentioned you've been teaching music. How's that treating you? Well enough, Elara said carefully. Marcus was handsome in a soft, uncomplicated way. Nothing like Darian's sharp intensity. It's honest work. Better than the alternative, I imagine. The scandal must have been difficult. There it was. The elephant everyone had been politely ignoring. Elara forced a smile. Ancient history. I've moved on. Good for you. Most people can't recover from that kind of fall. He leaned closer, voice dropping conspiratorially. Between you and me, I always thought the whole thing seemed fishy. Your brother had too much to gain from you disappearing. Elara's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. What do you mean? Just that Adrian consolidated a lot of power right after your scandal broke. Convenient timing, don't you think? Marcus shrugged. But what do I know? I'm just a merchant's son playing at nobility. Before Elara could respond, Cora tapped her glass, drawing everyone's attention. I have an announcement. Tomorrow's hunt has been reorganized. We'll be splitting into teams, much more exciting than everyone wandering off alone. Partners will be drawn from a hat after dessert. Groans and laughter rippled around the table. Elara's mind was still stuck on Marcus's words. Adrian had too much to gain. Everyone assumed her brother had protected her from the scandal's worst consequences. But what if he'd orchestrated the whole thing? What if destroying her reputation had been the goal all along? The possibility made her feel sick. Dessert arrived, some elaborate confection involving chocolate and spun sugar. Cora brought out a velvet hat and made a show of mixing up folded papers with names on them. One by one, guests drew their hunting partners for tomorrow. When Elara's turn came, she pulled out a slip and unfolded it. Darian Wolfe. Of course, because the universe had a twisted sense of humor. Across the table, Darian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, maybe. Or calculation. With him, it was hard to tell the difference. Excellent, Cora clapped her hands. This is going to be such fun. Everyone meet in the stables at dawn. And please, try not to shoot each other. Mother would be very upset about bloodstains on the lawn. More laughter. Elara folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket, her heart doing complicated things she didn't want to examine too closely. Tomorrow. Dawn. Hours alone in the woods with a man who was either going to save her or destroy her. She drained her wine glass and tried not to think about how badly this could end. After dinner, she retreated to her room and found a letter waiting on her pillow. Adrian's handwriting. Her hand shook as she broke the seal. Little sister, I trust you've arrived safely at Thornwick and begun your assignment. I expect your first report by tomorrow evening. Be thorough. I want to know who the Duke talks to, what he discusses. Any business dealings mentioned. Don't disappoint me. Your loving brother, A. Elara, burned the letter in her fireplace and watched the paper curl into ash. Then she sat down at the small writing desk and began composing her reply. the first lie in what would become a web of deception. Adrian arrived safely. The Duke seems distracted, preoccupied with something. He's been in private meetings with several guests. I'm working on identifying the topics. We'll have more details tomorrow after the hunt. Cora remains oblivious. E short, vague, just enough to satisfy him without giving away anything useful. She sealed it and left it for the footman to collect in the morning. Then she climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to convince herself she hadn't just made the worst decision of her life. Outside her window, the manor settled into quiet. Somewhere down the hall, Darian Wolfe was probably planning tomorrow's strategy. Somewhere across the city, her brother was congratulating himself on manipulating her so perfectly. And here she was, caught between them, about to betray one of them. She just wasn't sure which one yet. Dawn came too fast and too cold. Elara stood in the stable yard, breath misting in the early light, watching the other guests stumble out in their hunting attire. The Hartley sisters looked half asleep. Marcus Thorne was arguing with a groom about saddles. And Darian leaned against the stable wall like he'd been awake for hours, rifle already slung over his shoulder, watching her with those calculating gray eyes. "Ready?" he asked when she approached. "No." She adjusted the borrowed riding jacket Cora had lent her. Too big in the shoulders, too tight at the waist. Nothing about this morning felt right. "But I wrote the letter. It's waiting to be sent." "What did you tell him?" "That you're distracted, preoccupied. Having private meetings I'm trying to learn more about." She kept her voice low as other hunters milled around them. Vague enough to be useless, but specific enough to sound like I'm trying. Darian's mouth quirked. Smart. Keep him hungry for details without actually feeding him anything real. He pushed off the wall and gestured toward 2 horses being led out. "Come on, we've got about 4 hours before anyone expects us back. That's 4 hours to get our story straight about what we're actually doing out there." They mounted up, Elara on a gray mare that seemed bored by the whole affair, Darian on a black gelding that looked like it enjoyed violence. The hunting party scattered into the woods in pairs, following different trails. Cora waved cheerfully as she rode off with Lord Pemberton, completely oblivious to the fact that her house party had become a staging ground for espionage. Once they were alone among the trees, Darian slowed his pace. The forest was beautiful in that harsh autumn way, all gold and rust and the smell of dying leaves. Elara's mare picked her way along the path, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke. "Marcus said something last night," Elara finally broke the silence. "At dinner, about how my scandal was convenient timing for Adrian." "He's not wrong." Darian glanced at her. "Your brother needed you gone to consolidate power. A sister asking questions, poking around his business dealings, that's a liability. Easier to manufacture a crisis and use it to exile you. So he destroyed my reputation as a business strategy." "Probably." The casual confirmation hurt more than it should have. Elara had suspected, of course, had spent 5 years turning it over in her mind, but hearing it stated as fact, as something obvious enough that a stranger like Marcus could see it, made the betrayal fresh again. "How do you live with it?" she asked quietly. "Knowing your own family would throw you away like that?" Darian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its sharp edge. "You don't live with it. You survive it. There's a difference." He adjusted his rifle. "My father tried to marry me off to a duke's daughter when I was 19. Didn't care that I barely knew her. Didn't care that the alliance would have bankrupted our estate within 5 years. He just wanted the prestige of the connection." "What did you do?" "Refused. He disowned me for 3 months. Told everyone I was ungrateful, reckless, a disappointment." Darian's smile was bitter. "Then his other investments collapsed and suddenly he needed me again. Funny how family loyalty becomes negotiable when money's involved." Elara studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the scar that caught the morning light. "You went back to him anyway. I took control of the family finances and made sure he couldn't make those mistakes again. Then I made enough money that he became irrelevant." He looked at her. "That's the thing about people like your brother, like my father. They only have power because we give it to them. The moment you stop playing their game, they lose." "That easy?" "I didn't say it was easy. I said it's possible." A twig snapped somewhere to their left. Both of them tensed, hands moving to their rifles. But it was just a deer, a young buck picking through the underbrush. It froze when it saw them, dark eyes wide, then bolted deeper into the forest. Darian lowered his rifle. "We should keep moving. There's an old hunting cabin about a mile north. We can talk there without worrying about eavesdroppers." They rode in silence after that. The woods grew denser, the path narrower. Elara's mind churned through scenarios. What to tell Adrian in the next letter? How to balance enough truth to be convincing with enough lies to be useful? It felt like juggling knives. One wrong move and everything would come down bloody. The cabin appeared through the trees like something from a ghost story. Small, weathered, half swallowed by moss and ivy. Darian dismounted and tied his horse to a post that looked like it might collapse if you breathed on it too hard. "Charming," Elara said, climbing down from her mare. "Does it come with tetanus or is that extra?" "Comes standard." He pushed open the door, which groaned like it was personally offended. Inside was one room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, and enough dust to build a second cabin. "Used to come here as a kid. My uncle owned Thornwick before Cora's family bought it." Elara stepped inside, wrinkling her nose at the stale air. "And you chose this as our secret meeting place because no one else knows it exists, and because we need somewhere private to plan how we're going to destroy your brother without getting killed in the process." He set his rifle against the wall and pulled out the notebook from yesterday. "Now, let's talk strategy." They spent the next 2 hours building their trap. Darian sketched out Adrian's known business interests on paper. Elara filled in the gaps, his patterns, his weaknesses, the way he thought. It was like dissecting a shark, fascinating and nauseating in equal measure. "He's patient," she said, pacing the small cabin. "That's what makes him dangerous. He'll spend months setting up a con. Years, if it's big enough. He doesn't rush. So we need to make him rush." Darian tapped his pen against the page. "Give him an opportunity that's too good to pass up, something time-sensitive." "Like what?" "Like me." He looked up, eyes sharp. "Your brother wants to know what I'm planning next, right? What investments I'm pursuing after Iron Ridge fell through." "That's what he'd want, yes." "Then we give him exactly that. Feed him information about a deal I'm supposedly considering. Make it big, make it lucrative, make it something he can't resist trying to sabotage or steal." Darian's smile turned predatory. "And make it completely fake." Elara stopped pacing. "You want to bait him with a phantom deal. Not phantom. Real enough that he'll commit resources to it. Fake enough that when he makes his move, we'll catch him red-handed." He stood, moving to the window. "I've been thinking about the Westridge timber contracts. Big government deal. Exclusive logging rights for the next decade. Worth a fortune if you get the bid." "Are you actually bidding on it?" "No. But Adrian doesn't know that. As far as he's concerned, I'm scrambling to recover from the Iron Ridge disaster. Looking for the next big score." Darian turned to face her. "You tell him I'm pursuing Westridge, that I'm meeting with government officials, that the bid is due in 2 weeks and I'm confident I'll win it." Elara's mind raced ahead. "And when he tries to undercut your bid or bribe the officials, he'll be bribing people who are working with me, officials I've already brought into the plan. We document everything, every bribe attempt, every forged document, every illegal move he makes trying to steal a contract that was never real to begin with." It was brilliant, ruthless and risky, but brilliant. "What happens when he realizes it's a trap?" "By then, we'll have enough evidence to bury him. Fraud, bribery. Attempted theft of government contracts. That's not just scandal, that's prison time." Darian's expression hardened. "He threatened to destroy your life. I say we return the favor." Elara's hands had gone cold. This was real. They were actually going to do this. "If it goes wrong, it won't." "You can't promise that." "No," Darian admitted. "But I can promise that if it does go wrong, I'll make sure you're protected. You and Cora both. Whatever happens, Adrian doesn't get to hurt you again." The sincerity in his voice made something crack open in Elara's chest. She'd spent so long convinced that trusting anyone was suicide, that letting people close meant giving them ammunition. But Darian was looking at her like she mattered, like her safety was worth more than revenge or victory or whatever he stood to gain from this alliance. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Really? Not the debt you owe me, not strategy. Why are you helping me destroy my brother?" Darian was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost all its careful control. "Because I know what it's like to have family treat you like a tool, like something to be used and discarded when you stop being profitable. He moved closer, and Elara found herself frozen in place. And because when you walked up to me at that ball, behind that mask, risking everything to warn a stranger, that took more courage than anything I've seen in years. You deserve better than living in fear of a bastard who should have protected you. Her breath caught. They were standing too close. Close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes. Close enough to feel the heat coming off him in the cold cabin. Darian! A gunshot cracked through the morning. They both spun toward the window. The sound had come from the east. Not close, but not far enough away to be another hunting party. Could be nothing, Darian said, but his hand was already on his rifle. Could be someone bagging a deer. Another shot. Then shouting. Distant, but urgent. That's not hunting. Elara's stomach dropped. Someone's in trouble. They ran. The horses protested being pushed so hard, but Darian drove them forward through the trees toward the sound of chaos. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. Please don't let it be Cora. Please don't let Adrian have escalated this fast. They burst into a clearing and found Marcus Thorne on the ground, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. His hunting partner, one of the Hartley sisters, was screaming, backing away from two men Elara didn't recognize. Rough clothes, hard faces. One of them had a rifle pointed at Marcus. Nobody moves, the man with the rifle said. His accent was local, working class, not nobility. We're just here for the Duke. Elara's blood turned to ice. These men were here for Darian. Well, Darian said calmly, dismounting with his hands visible and empty. You found me. Now what? Now you come with us, nice and quiet. Your brother sends his regards, Miss Vance. The words hit like a physical blow. Adrian. This was Adrian's doing. He'd sent men to grab Darian right out of the middle of a hunting party, and he'd made sure Elara knew it was personal. Let Marcus go, Darian said. His voice was steady, but Elara could see the tension in his shoulders. This is between me and whoever hired you. The boy's not part of it. Boy tried to play hero. That's on him. The gunman gestured with his rifle. You, off the horse, slow. Elara climbed down, mind racing. Two armed men, one wounded civilian, one terrified witness. And Darian, who was weighing odds that didn't look good from any angle. How much is he paying you? Darian asked conversationally. Vance, whatever he offered, I'll double it. The gunman smiled. Nice try, but we don't break contracts. Bad for business. What about breaking bones? Is that bad for business too? The second man laughed. Ugly sound. Funny. Boss said you'd try to talk your way out, said you were all charm and no spine. Your boss doesn't know me very well. He knows enough. Like how you pulled out of Iron Ridge right before it would have made him very rich. How you've been sniffing around his sister, trying to turn her against him. The gunman's eyes flicked to Elara. Family loyalty means something, Your Grace. Maybe you should have remembered that before you started this war. Adrian had planned this. Not just hiring thugs to grab Darian, but timing it perfectly. Making sure Elara was here to see it, to understand that every move she made, every alliance she formed, he was 10 steps ahead. Elara, Darian said quietly. Not looking at her, eyes locked on the gunman. Take Marcus and Miss Hartley. Ride back to the manor. Get help. I'm not leaving. Yes, you are. Now he did look at her, and his expression was hard as iron. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment he sent them here. And it stops being your fight the moment you get on that horse, please. The gunman was getting impatient. Enough talking. You. He gestured at Elara with the rifle barrel. Help the bleeding boy onto his horse. Then all three of you ride out. Nice and slow. Anyone tries to be clever, the Duke gets a bullet in the leg. Understand? Elara's hand shook as she moved toward Marcus. The young man was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. The shoulder wound looked bad but not fatal, assuming they got him medical attention soon. Can you stand? She asked. I think so. Marcus's voice was tight with pain. What the hell is going on? Long story. Come on. She helped him up, every movement feeling like it took hours. Miss Hartley had stopped screaming and was just staring, shock written across her face. Elara got Marcus onto his horse, then turned back to Darian. He stood very still, hands at his sides, watching the armed men like he was calculating trajectories, measuring distances, planning something that would probably get him killed. Don't, Elara said quietly. Whatever you're thinking, don't. Get out of here. Darian, I'll be fine. Your brother wants me alive. That gives me leverage. His smile was grim. Now go. And when you write your next letter to Adrian, tell him exactly what happened here. Tell him his message was received. The gunman moved forward, grabbing Darian's arm. Enough stalling. Move. Elara wanted to fight. Wanted to grab her rifle and do something stupid and heroic and completely suicidal. But Marcus was bleeding and Miss Hartley was traumatized, and getting herself killed wouldn't save anyone. She climbed onto her horse, took Marcus's reins in hand, and looked back one more time. Darian met her eyes. In that moment, she saw everything he wasn't saying out loud. Trust the plan. Don't do anything rash. We're not done yet. Then the men dragged him into the trees, and he was gone. The ride back to Thornwick was a blur of panic and adrenaline. Marcus stayed conscious through sheer stubbornness. Miss Hartley sobbed quietly, and Elara's mind spun through scenarios, each one worse than the last. Adrian had Darian. Adrian, who'd proven he was willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. Darian, who'd promised to help her fight back and was now paying the price for that promise. This was her fault. She'd dragged him into this war. She'd made him a target. They burst into the stable yard and chaos erupted. Grooms running, Cora screaming, Lord Thornwick shouting for someone to fetch a doctor. Elara dismounted and found herself surrounded by questions she couldn't answer. What happened? Where's the Duke? Who did this? Cora grabbed her shoulders. Elara, talk to me. What happened out there? Elara's voice came out flat, dead. My brother happened. She pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouted questions, and went straight to her room. The letter to Adrian sat on her desk, sealed and waiting. She ripped it open, grabbed a pen, and wrote 3 more lines at the bottom. Your message was received. You have the Duke. What do you want? She sealed it again, went downstairs, and shoved it into the hands of Adrian's footman, who was conveniently waiting in the hall like he'd known this was coming. Deliver this now, she said, and tell my brother I want a response within the hour, or I start talking to people he doesn't want me talking to. The footman's expression didn't change. Of course, Miss Vance. He left. Elara stood in the empty hallway, fists clenched so hard her nails drew blood. Darian had told her to tell Adrian exactly what happened, to confirm his message was received, but he hadn't told her what to do after that. Hadn't given her a contingency plan for when everything went catastrophically wrong. She was on her own. Again. Cora found her an hour later, still standing in the hallway like she'd forgotten how to move. The doctor's with Marcus, Cora said quietly. He'll be fine. Bullet went clean through. She paused. The magistrate is here. He wants to talk to you about what you saw. I didn't see anything useful. Elara, I need to think. She finally looked at her friend. I need to figure out how to fix this. You can't fix this alone. Let me help. Let Thornwick help. We have resources, connections. This isn't your fight. That's what the Duke said before they took him, isn't it? Cora's voice hardened. And look how well that worked out. Stop trying to protect everyone by shouldering everything yourself. You're not alone anymore unless you choose to be. The words cut deeper than they should have. Elara had been alone for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to have people who actually gave a damn whether she lived or died. Adrian took him to send me a message, she said quietly, that I don't get to choose sides, that everyone I care about becomes a target. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Yes, you do. Cora moved closer, forcing Elara to look at her. You warned the Duke at that ball because you were tired of watching your brother destroy people. This is the same choice, just bigger stakes. If I fight back, people get hurt. People are already hurt. Marcus is upstairs with a hole in his shoulder. The Duke is wherever your brother's thugs dragged him, and you're standing here acting like you're the problem when Adrian is the one terrorizing everyone. Cora's eyes flashed. So stop apologizing for existing and start fighting back. Before Elara could respond, Adrian's footman reappeared. He handed her a sealed envelope without a word and left. Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Little sister, you wanted the Duke protected. I'm protecting him from himself. He'll remain my guest until you deliver what I asked for. Real information, real intelligence, Proof that you're working for me and not playing double agent with that northern fool. You have 48 hours to bring me documents, contracts, letters. Something that proves the Duke trusts you enough to share his business dealings. Deliver them to the Rosewood Club. Come alone. And Elara? If you're thinking about going to the authorities, remember that I have friends in very high places. Friends who owe me favors. Friends who will make sure any accusations against me disappear along with the people making them. Don't test me. Your loving brother, A. 48 hours. 2 days to produce evidence that didn't exist. 2 days to somehow prove she'd infiltrated Darian's trust while also figuring out where he was being held and how to get him out alive. Impossible odds. Elara read the letter 3 times, then walked to the fireplace and dropped it into the flames. What did it say? Cora asked. That I have 2 days to give him what he wants or Darian dies. And what does he want? Proof that the Duke trusts me. Documents, business contracts, things that don't exist because Darian and I were building a trap, not a real alliance. She laughed, sharp and bitter. We were so busy planning how to catch Adrian that we never planned for him catching us first. Cora was quiet for a moment, then, so make them exist. Elara turned. What? The documents? The contracts? Make them? Cora's expression was fierce. You know what Adrian wants to see. You know what would convince him. So give it to him. Forge every piece of evidence he's asking for. That's exactly what he'd do. Fight fire with fire. Cora grabbed her hands. You have 48 hours. I have my father's library, his business files, every legal document template you could possibly need. We forge contracts that look real enough to fool Adrian. You deliver them. And while he's busy celebrating his victory, we find the Duke and get him out. It was insane, reckless, the kind of plan that only worked in stories where heroes got impossibly lucky. But it was also the only plan they had. If this doesn't work, Elara started, then we go down fighting, Cora finished. Together, the way it should have been 5 years ago. Elara squeezed her friend's hands. For the first time since watching Darian disappear into the trees, she felt something other than helpless rage. Not hope. Hope was too fragile for what they were about to attempt, but determination. She'd warned Darian about her brother. She'd chosen to fight back, and she'd be damned if she let Adrian win now. Okay, she said. Let's forge some documents and commit several felonies. Cora's smile was sharp as broken glass. Now you're talking. They spent the next 6 hours locked in Lord Thornwick's study, surrounded by paper and ink and desperate concentration. Cora pulled contract templates from her father's files. Elara drafted correspondence in what she hoped looked like Darian's handwriting. She'd seen enough of it in his notebook to fake it passably. They forged meeting notes, investment proposals, letters discussing the fake Westridge timber deal in enough detail to be convincing. It felt like building a house of cards in a hurricane. One wrong detail and Adrian would see through it immediately, but they didn't have time for perfection. They barely had time for functional. This one needs an official seal, Cora said, holding up a contract. Adrian will expect it. Where do we get? Cora was already pulling open a drawer. Father collects them, don't ask why. Rich people are weird. She pressed a seal into hot wax, leaving an impression that looked official enough to pass at a glance. By midnight, they had a stack of documents that might convince Adrian that Elara had successfully infiltrated Darian's trust. Letters proving she'd gotten close to him. Contracts showing he'd shared confidential business information. Meeting notes suggesting he was planning major investments. All of it completely fabricated. All of it their only chance. Elara held the forged papers and felt the weight of what they were about to do. This wasn't just lying to Adrian. This was walking into his territory alone, with fake evidence and no backup plan. If he suspected the truth, if he'd hurt Darian already, if his threat about friends in high places wasn't bluster. Hey, Cora touched her shoulder. You can do this. How do you know? Because you've survived him this long. Because you're smarter than he gives you credit for. And because you're not that scared girl he exiled 5 years ago. Cora's voice was steady, certain. You're the woman who walked into a ballroom and saved a stranger's fortune. You're the woman who chose to fight back even when it would have been safer to stay hidden. Adrian thinks he knows you. Prove him wrong. Elara nodded, throat too tight for words. 48 hours had become 36. Then 24. Then she was standing outside the Rosewood Club at dusk 2 days later, forged documents tucked into a leather portfolio, heart trying to break through her ribs. The club was exactly what she'd expected. All dark wood and expensive whiskey, and men who thought money made them invincible. Adrian's domain. She walked through the doors like she belonged there, chin up, shoulders back, every inch the disgraced noblewoman who'd finally accepted her place in her brother's shadow. A servant directed her to a private room on the second floor. She climbed the stairs, each step feeling like walking toward her own execution. Adrian waited inside, sitting behind a desk like he was conducting a business meeting. He smiled when she entered, that same warm, poisonous smile. Elara. Right on time. I'm impressed. She set the portfolio on his desk without a word. He opened it, started reading. His expression didn't change, but she watched his eyes move across the pages, cataloging every detail, looking for inconsistencies, traps. The silence stretched until she wanted to scream. Finally, Adrian looked up. Westridge Timber. Aggressive timeline. Bold move for someone who just lost Iron Ridge. He tapped the contract. These look legitimate. They are. Are they? He leaned back, studying her face. Or did you and the Duke forge them to feed me false information while you planned some noble crusade against your own blood? Elara's heart stopped. He knew, or suspected, or was testing her. She forced herself to meet his eyes. The Duke trusts me. I delivered. That was the deal. The deal was you'd work for me, not play games. I'm not. Then prove it. Adrian stood, moving around the desk. Tell me where the Duke is. Her stomach dropped. You took him. Did I? His smile widened. Maybe I did. Or maybe he's somewhere safe, wondering if his new ally is about to betray him. He stopped in front of her. Last chance, Elara. Are you with me or against me? The room felt like it was closing in. This was the moment. The choice that would define everything. Betray Darian's location if Adrian was lying and didn't actually have him, or call his bluff and hope the documents were enough. She opened her mouth to answer. The door burst open. Darian Wolfe stood there, disheveled and furious, blood on his collar but very much alive and free. And behind him, 3 magistrate guards with weapons drawn. Adrian's expression froze. Elara's mind went blank. Adrian Vance, one of the guards said, you're under arrest for kidnapping, assault, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Everything happened too fast. Adrian lunged for the desk drawer, going for a weapon probably, but Darian was faster. He grabbed Adrian's arm, twisted it behind his back, slammed him face first into the mahogany. That's for the shoulder wound your thugs gave Marcus, Darian said quietly, and for threatening Elara. The guards moved in, snapping restraints on Adrian's wrists. Her brother was shouting, threats, accusations, promises that his lawyers would destroy everyone involved. But for the first time in Elara's life, his voice sounded powerless, small, defeated. Darian turned to her, and despite the blood and exhaustion, he was smiling. Did you really think I'd let myself get kidnapped without an escape plan? You... Her voice failed. How... I'll explain everything, but first... He looked at the portfolio still sitting on the desk. Please tell me those documents are fake, and you didn't actually betray my business dealings to your brother. Despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the absolute insanity of the past 2 days, Elara started laughing. They're fake, she managed. Cora and I forged everything. We've been committing felonies for 48 hours straight. Excellent. Darian's smile turned genuine. Then we have a lot to discuss. But maybe somewhere that isn't your brother's club while he's being arrested for multiple crimes. The guards were already dragging Adrian toward the door. He caught Elara's eye one last time, rage and disbelief, and something that might have been betrayal written across his face. You'll regret this, he hissed. You chose wrong, little sister. No, Elara said quietly. For the first time in my life, I chose right. Then he was gone, and she was standing in the wreckage of her family's empire with a man she'd known for less than a week and a friend who'd risked everything to help her. Cora appeared in the doorway, breathless. Did I miss it? Please tell me I didn't miss the dramatic arrest. You missed it, Darian confirmed, but there'll be plenty of drama at the trial if you're interested. Obviously I'm interested. Cora looked at Elara. Are you okay? Was she? Elara's hands were shaking. Her brother was in custody. Her carefully constructed quiet life had exploded into chaos, and somehow, impossibly, she'd won. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Ask me tomorrow." "Fair enough." Cora linked their arms. "Come on, let's get out of this horrible club and find somewhere with better whiskey. I think we've earned it." They walked out together, all three of them, leaving the Rosewood Club and Adrian's shattered empire behind. They found whiskey at a tavern 3 blocks from the Rosewood Club, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the bartender poured heavy. Elara collapsed into a corner booth, exhaustion hitting her like a physical weight now that the adrenaline was draining away. Cora slid in beside her. Darian took the opposite bench, wincing slightly as he settled into the seat. "You're hurt," Elara said, noticing the way he favored his left side. Bruised ribs, maybe cracked, hard to tell. He accepted the whiskey Cora pushed across the table. Adrian's thugs weren't gentle when they realized I'd been faking unconsciousness for the past 6 hours. 6 hours? Cora leaned forward. "Start from the beginning. How did you get away? How did you know where to find us?" Darian took a long drink before answering. "I didn't get away. I let them take me." Elara's glass stopped halfway to her mouth. "What?" The moment those men showed up in the woods, I knew this wasn't random violence. This was Adrian making a move, and the best way to understand his operation was to let myself become part of it. He rolled his shoulders, grimacing. So I went quietly, let them think they'd won, and while they were congratulating themselves on capturing a duke, I was memorizing faces, locations, everything I'd need to dismantle his entire network. "That's insane," Elara said flatly. "That's strategic." Darian's smile was sharp. "Your brother made a mistake. He assumed I'd panic, fight back, try to escape immediately. Instead, I played unconscious for most of the ride. Woke up long enough to overhear some very interesting conversations about his business partners, then waited until they got sloppy with the ropes. And then? Then I broke a man's nose, stole his horse, and rode straight to the magistrate's office with enough evidence to make Adrian's arrest inevitable." He pulled a folded paper from his coat. Names, dates, locations of illegal operations. 2 of the men who grabbed me started talking the moment they realized I could identify them. Turns out loyalty is expensive, and Adrian wasn't paying enough. Cora grabbed the paper, scanning it with wide eyes. There are at least a dozen criminal enterprises listed here. Fraud, extortion, bribery. That's just what I documented in 6 hours. Darian's expression hardened. "Your brother has been operating like this for years, building an empire on other people's suffering." The Iron Ridge scheme was just one thread in a much larger web. Elara's hands had gone cold. She'd known Adrian was corrupt, had watched him destroy people with casual efficiency. But seeing it laid out like this, the scope of it, the calculated cruelty, made her feel sick. "How many people has he hurt?" "Dozens, maybe hundreds." Darian's voice was quiet. "But it ends now. The magistrate has enough to prosecute, and once the trial starts, more victims will come forward. People who were too scared to speak up before will see that Adrian's protection is gone." "He said he had friends in high places," Elara said. "Judges, officials, people who owe him favors." "He did. Past tense." Darian leaned back, and despite the exhaustion and injuries, he looked satisfied. "I spent the ride back from wherever they were holding me, making some calls of my own. Turns out dukes also have friends in high places. And when you give those friends documented evidence of widespread corruption, they tend to act fast. By the time I reached the Rosewood Club, 3 of Adrian's most powerful allies had already distanced themselves publicly." Cora was grinning now. "You destroyed his support network in under 12 hours. "I had motivation." Darian's eyes found Elara's. "He threatened someone under my protection. That tends to focus the mind." The almost confession hung in the air between them. Elara looked away first, her face heating despite everything. This wasn't the time. They just dismantled her family's empire and her brother was facing prison. Romance was the last thing she should be thinking about. But the way Darian had said the way he'd caught himself before finishing that sentence, made something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest. "So what happens now?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Adrian's arrested, but the trial could take months, and in the meantime his business partners might retaliate. Let them try." Darian's smile turned predatory. I've already filed injunctions freezing Adrian's assets. His businesses, his properties, his bank accounts, all locked pending investigation. Anyone connected to his schemes is scrambling to cover their own involvement. They don't have time to come after us. Us, Elara repeated softly. The word felt strange, foreign. She'd spent so long thinking of herself as alone that having allies, having people who said us and meant it, still didn't feel real. Cora squeezed her hand under the table. You're not alone anymore. Get used to it. I'm trying. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything they'd survived settling over the table like snow. The tavern hummed with conversation around them, normal people having normal evenings, completely unaware that 3 exhausted conspirators in the corner booth had just toppled a criminal empire. I forged documents, Elara said suddenly. Those contracts I showed Adrian, I committed fraud. Darian waved a hand dismissively. You created evidence for an undercover operation, completely different. Is it? Legally, probably not, but the magistrate isn't going to prosecute you for helping bring down Adrian Vance. Trust me. He finished his whiskey. Besides, those forgeries were impressive. You have a real talent for criminal enterprise. Ever considered a career change? Despite everything, Elara laughed. It came out slightly hysterical, but it was laughter. I think I'll stick with teaching music, thanks. Probably wise. Darian signaled for another round. Though you should know, when this is over, when the trial is done and Adrian is where he belongs, you won't have to hide anymore. The scandal that drove you away 5 years ago? I'm going to make sure everyone knows it was fabricated, that your brother destroyed your reputation to consolidate power. Her breath caught. You can't prove that. I can try, and even if I can't prove it legally, I can make sure the truth spreads. Society thrives on gossip. Give them a better story. Disgraced noblewoman actually a hero who stood up to her corrupt brother, and they'll eat it up. His expression softened. You deserve to have your name back, Elara. Your life back. Everything he took from you. I don't know if I want that life back, she admitted quietly. The balls, the politics, the constant performance. I've gotten used to being invisible. Then don't go back to that life. Build a new one. Cora's voice was fierce. On your terms this time. Not running from scandal. Not hiding. Just living. Whatever that looks like for you. The bartender arrived with fresh drinks. Elara stared at her glass, watching the amber liquid catch the lamplight. A new life. The concept felt impossibly large. For 5 years, she'd defined herself by what she'd lost, what she was running from. The idea of actually moving forward, of choosing what she wanted instead of just surviving, was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I need air, she said abruptly, sliding out of the booth. I'll be right back. She stepped outside into the cool evening, sucking in deep breaths of night air that smelled like coal smoke and rain. The street was quiet. A few carriages rolled past. Somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed the hour. Adrian was in custody. After years of controlling her life, manipulating her choices, holding the threat of exposure over her head like a blade, he was finally powerless. She should feel victorious, relieved, something other than this hollow, dizzy sensation like the ground had dropped out from under her. The tavern door opened behind her. Darian's footsteps were quiet on the cobblestones. You okay? He asked. Honestly? I have no idea. She didn't turn around. I spent 5 years being angry at him, scared of him, planning ways to stop him, and now that it's done, I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. There's no supposed to. You feel whatever you feel. He came to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. For what it's worth, I think you're allowed to be a mess right now. You just watched your brother get arrested. That's not nothing, even if he deserved it. He did deserve it. I know. But he's still your brother. It's okay if that's complicated. Elara finally looked at him. In the lamplight, Darian's face was all sharp angles and shadows. The scar on his jaw stood out pale against his skin. He looked tired, battered, and somehow still ready to fight if needed. Thank you, she said quietly, for believing me at the ball, for investigating, for... Her voice cracked. For everything. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You risked your life today. Let yourself get kidnapped to gather evidence. You could have just walked away after I warned you about Iron Ridge, protected yourself and forgotten I existed. I could have, Darian agreed. But that would have been a waste of a perfectly good alliance, and besides, he turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gray eyes made her breath catch. I don't forget people who walk into enemy territory to save strangers. That kind of courage is rare. Worth protecting. They were standing too close again, like in the cabin, like in every charged moment they'd shared over the past week. Elara's heart was doing complicated things in her chest, and she should step back, create distance. Remember that this was a strategic alliance built on mutual necessity, not. Darian's hand came up to cup her face, gentle, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't pull away. The kiss was soft at first, tentative. Then his other hand found her waist, and she grabbed his coat, and suddenly it wasn't soft anymore. It was desperate and fierce and tasted like whiskey and victory and the kind of reckless hope she'd forgotten how to feel. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Darian rested his forehead against hers. That was, he started. A terrible idea, Elara finished. We just dismantled a criminal empire. This is probably shock or adrenaline, or maybe I've wanted to do that since you appeared at the ball in that blue dress and told me my fortune was about to disappear. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Maybe I'm tired of pretending this is just strategy. Darian, you don't have to say anything. I know the timing is awful. I know we have a trial to prepare for, and your life is in chaos, and I'm probably the last thing you need right now. He pulled back slightly, giving her space. But when this is over, when Adrian is sentenced and you've had time to figure out what comes next, I want to be part of that. If you'll have me. Elara's throat was too tight for words. A week ago, she'd been teaching music to merchant children and trying to forget she'd ever been a Vance. Now she was standing outside a tavern, being offered a future by a man who'd turned his kidnapping into an intelligence-gathering operation. Ask me again when we're both sober and not covered in metaphorical blood, she managed. Darian's laugh was low and warm. Deal. They went back inside to find Cora pretending very hard that she hadn't been watching through the window. So, Cora said innocently, did we get enough air? Shut up, Elara said, but she was smiling. I'm just saying there's a lot of air out there, very breathable, might require multiple people to properly evaluate. Darian cleared his throat. We should discuss next steps. The trial preparation. What the magistrate will need from us. Excellent subject change, Cora said. Very subtle. I definitely believe you were thinking about legal proceedings just now, and nothing else. Elara kicked her under the table. They spent the next hour going through logistics. Darian had already given his initial statement to the magistrate. Elara would need to provide her own testimony about Adrian's threats and the coercion. Marcus Thorne had agreed to testify about the shooting, and the two thugs who'd kidnapped Darian were apparently very eager to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. The trial won't be quick, Darian warned. Adrian's lawyers will drag this out as long as possible. Months, probably. Maybe longer. Can he get bail? Elara asked. Not with kidnapping and assault charges. The magistrate denied it this afternoon. Darian's expression was grim. He's staying in custody until the trial concludes. The relief that crashed through Elara was physical. Adrian locked up, unable to threaten her, unable to hurt anyone else while his empire crumbled around him. It felt like being able to breathe fully for the first time in years. What about his business partners? Cora asked. The people on that list, are they being investigated too? Most of them. Some have already fled the city. Others are cooperating to save themselves. Darian pulled out the paper again, pointing to names. The Pemberton account was one of Adrian's shell companies. Lord Pemberton claims he knew nothing about it, probably lying, but proving it will be difficult. Same with half these names. They'll claim ignorance, blame everything on Adrian, and hope the magistrate doesn't dig too deep. So some of them get away with it, Elara said flatly. Some of them always do. That's how this works. Darian's voice was hard. But the key players, the ones who enabled the worst of it, they'll face consequences. And your brother? He's not walking away from this. Ever. The finality in his voice should have felt satisfying. Instead, Elara just felt tired, bone-deep exhausted. She wanted this to be over. wanted to skip past the trial and the testimony and the public dissection of her family's corruption and wake up on the other side, wherever that was. I should get back to Thornwick, she said, before Cora's parents start asking questions about why their house party turned into a crime scene. Too late for that, Cora said cheerfully. Mother's already planning how to spin this into the social event of the season. The Thornwick party, where a duke was kidnapped and a corrupt noble fell. She's thinking of commissioning a painting. Your mother is terrifying. I know. It's one of her best qualities. They settled their tab and stepped back out into the night. The street was quieter now, most of the city tucked into bed, or at least pretending to be respectable. A carriage waited nearby, Darian's by the look of the family crest on the door. I'll take you back, he offered. Both of you, it's late. The ride to Thornwick was quiet. Elara sat between Cora and Darian, watching the city roll past through the window. Street lamps cast pools of gold on wet cobblestones. A few late-night wanderers hurried through the shadows. Normal life, continuing on, completely unaware that the world had shifted. When they reached the manor, lights still blazed in the windows. Lord and Lady Thornwick were probably up waiting, worried about their daughter and their missing Duke guest. The thought of facing their questions made Elara want to curl up and sleep for a week. Come on, Cora said, linking their arms. We'll face the parental inquisition together, strength in numbers. Darian climbed down from the carriage, wincing again at his ribs. I'll send word tomorrow about the trial preparation. The magistrate wants to meet with all witnesses within the next few days. We'll be ready, Elara said. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else, then seemed to think better of it and just nodded. Good night, then. Good night. She watched the carriage roll away, disappearing down the long drive. Beside her, Cora was trying very hard not to smile. Don't, Elara warned. I didn't say anything. You were thinking it loudly. Can't prove that. Cora tugged her toward the entrance. Come on, let's go get interrogated by my parents and then sleep for approximately 16 hours. Lord and Lady Thornwick were indeed waiting in the drawing room. They looked like they'd aged a decade in the past 2 days. But when they saw Elara and Cora walk in unharmed, the relief on their faces was genuine. Thank the stars, Lady Thornwick said, pulling Cora into a fierce hug. When we heard what happened, the shooting, the Duke's kidnapping, we thought, We're fine, Mother, Cora said. A bit traumatized, definitely committing some light fraud, but fine. Light fraud? Lord Thornwick's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. I'll explain later. It's a very long story involving forgery and criminal enterprise and noble sacrifice. Cora extracted herself from her mother's embrace. The important thing is Adrian Vance is in custody, and everyone we care about is safe. Adrian Vance. Lady Thornwick's expression hardened. I always knew that man was trouble. Too charming by half. Men like that are always hiding something. Turns out he was hiding several criminal operations, Elara said quietly. I'm sorry for bringing this chaos to your home. I didn't mean— Nonsense, Lord Thornwick interrupted. You did nothing wrong. That brother of yours, on the other hand— He shook his head. The magistrate came by earlier, asked about the shooting on our property. I gave him everything I knew, which admittedly wasn't much, but I made it clear that Marcus Thorne was shot by men working for Vance. That should help the prosecution. Thank you. Elara's voice cracked. For everything. For letting me stay. For not asking too many questions. For being decent humans? Lady Thornwick smiled. My dear girl, you're Cora's friend. That makes you family. And we protect family. The casual inclusion made something break open in Elara's chest. She had spent so long thinking of family as a weapon, something that could be used against her, that came with strings and conditions and inevitable betrayal. The idea that it could be this simple, this unconditional, felt revolutionary. Now, Lady Thornwick continued, steering them toward the stairs, both of you need sleep. We can discuss the details tomorrow when you're not dead on your feet. Cora, make sure Elara has everything she needs. And for heaven's sake, try to avoid any more felonies before breakfast. No promises, Cora called back. They made it to Elara's borrowed room before collapsing into exhausted laughter. The kind that came from surviving impossible things and not quite believing you made it through intact. We did it, Cora said, flopping onto the bed. We actually did it. Adrian's arrested, Darian's safe, and you kissed a duke outside a tavern, like something out of a romance novel. I did not— Elara stopped. How did you even see that? Window, I told you, Cora grinned. So? How was it? I'm not discussing this. That good, huh? Elara threw a pillow at her. Cora caught it, still grinning like she'd won something. Seriously, though, Cora said, her expression softening. Are you okay? I know tonight was a lot. Was she okay? Elara sat down on the edge of the bed, trying to inventory her feelings. Exhausted, relieved, terrified about the trial, worried about what came after. But underneath all of that, underneath the fear and chaos and lingering adrenaline, was something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I will be, she said finally. I think, eventually. That's enough for now. Cora squeezed her hand. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we start figuring out what comes next. After Cora left, Elara changed into a nightgown and stood at the window, looking out over the dark grounds. Somewhere across the city, Adrian sat in a cell, probably raging about betrayal and planning appeals. Somewhere closer, Darian was likely reviewing evidence and preparing strategy. And here she was, still standing, still fighting, no longer running. She thought about what Darian had said outside the tavern, about being part of her future when this was over, about not pretending this was just strategy. The smart thing would be to keep her distance, focus on the trial, on rebuilding her life, on all the practical considerations that came with dismantling your family's empire. But when had she ever been smart about Darian Wolfe? She'd warned him at a masked ball when staying silent would have been safer. She'd agreed to spy on him, then immediately confessed the truth. She'd forged documents and committed fraud and walked into her brother's territory with nothing but fabricated evidence and desperate hope. Smart had never been part of their equation. Elara climbed into bed, pulled the covers up to her chin, and let herself imagine what came after. After the trial. After Adrian was sentenced. After the dust settled and she could finally breathe without waiting for the next disaster. Maybe there was a future where she didn't have to choose between hiding and fighting. Where she could just exist. Build something new, with people who chose to stay instead of using her as a pawn. Maybe there was a future with a scarred duke who turned kidnappings into intelligence operations and kissed her outside taverns like he meant it. Maybe she was allowed to want that. Sleep came slowly, but when it finally pulled her under, she didn't dream of Adrian or scandal or fear. She dreamed of dancing in a ballroom, mask-free, with a partner who already knew all her secrets and chose her anyway. The next 3 days were a blur of magistrate meetings and witness statements and legal proceedings that made Elara's head spin. She gave her testimony about Adrian's threats, his coercion, the way he'd tried to force her into spying. The magistrate listened with a grave expression, taking notes, asking clarifying questions. Marcus Thorne testified about the shooting. His shoulder was still bandaged, but he'd recovered enough to provide a detailed account of the ambush. The two thugs who'd kidnapped Darian had already confessed to working for Adrian, naming other accomplices in exchange for lighter sentences. The evidence piled up. Documented fraud, witness testimony, financial records showing years of illegal operations. Adrian's lawyers tried to argue that their client was being framed, that vengeful business rivals had fabricated evidence, but the sheer volume of proof was overwhelming. On the fourth day, the magistrate formally charged Adrian Vance with kidnapping, assault, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. 6 weeks, Elara said, sitting in Darian's study at his city residence. They'd fallen into the habit of meeting there to coordinate their testimonies, review evidence, plan strategy. That's fast for something this complicated. The magistrate wants to move quickly before Adrian's remaining allies can interfere. Darian looked up from the documents spread across his desk. And between us, I think he's enjoying taking down someone as powerful as your brother. Makes him look good to his superiors. Politics, even injustice. Especially injustice. Elara stood and moved to the window. Darian's study overlooked a small garden, neat hedges, stone paths, a fountain that burbled quietly in the center, peaceful, completely at odds with the chaos of the past week. What happens if he's acquitted? She asked quietly. He won't be. But if he is, Elara, Darian's voice was firm. Look at me. She turned. He'd stood from his desk and was walking toward her with that focused intensity she'd come to recognize. the expression that meant he was about to say something important and wanted her full attention. "Your brother is not walking away from this," he said. "The evidence is ironclad. Multiple witnesses, documented crimes. He's going to prison, and even if, by some miracle, his lawyers find a technicality, if he somehow avoids conviction, I will personally make sure he never has power again. His businesses are frozen. His allies have abandoned him. His reputation is destroyed. He's done." "You can't promise that." "Yes, I can, because I'm not stopping until he's where he belongs." Darian's expression softened slightly. "You're safe now. Really safe. Not because you're hiding, but because the threat is gone. You need to believe that." Elara wanted to accept that it was finally over, that she could stop looking over her shoulder. But 5 years of fear didn't evaporate in a week, no matter how much evidence piled up. "I'm trying," she said. "I know." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was casual, intimate, familiar in a way that should have scared her, but didn't. "Give it time. And in the meantime, let me worry about Adrian. You focus on figuring out what you want to do next." "What I want to do next," she repeated. "That's a terrifying question." "Why?" "Because I don't know the answer. For 5 years, I've been in survival mode, teaching music, staying invisible, avoiding anything that might draw attention. And now that I don't have to do that anymore, I have no idea what I actually want." Darian leaned against the windowsill beside her. "Start small. What do you want to do tomorrow?" "Sleep until noon. Maybe have breakfast without worrying about poisoned tea." "Achievable. What about next week?" "Survive the trial preparation without having a breakdown." "Also achievable. Next month?" Elara thought about it. Really thought about it. A month from now, the trial would be over or close to it. Adrian would be sentenced. She'd be free, truly free, for the first time since she could remember. "I want to teach music again," she said slowly, "but not in secret, not as a disgraced noblewoman hiding from scandal, just as someone who loves music and wants to share that with students." She paused. "And I want to spend time with people I choose, Cora, you, people who make me feel like myself instead of who I'm supposed to be." "That sounds like a good start. What about you?" She looked at him. "What do you want to do next?" Darian's smile was slow and warm. "Honestly, I want to take you to dinner, somewhere nice, somewhere that isn't a strategy meeting or a court appearance or a tavern where we're processing trauma. Like a date." Exactly like a date. Her heart did that complicated thing again. "We're in the middle of prosecuting my brother for multiple felonies. This is possibly the worst timing in history. Probably, but I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. Life doesn't work like that." He turned to face her fully. "I told you outside that tavern, I want to be part of what comes next. I meant it. So when you're ready, when this is over and you've had time to breathe, I'm asking you to dinner. As a date. No strategy, no crisis management, just us." Elara's throat was tight. "And if I say yes? Then I'll spend 6 weeks planning the perfect evening and probably overthinking every detail until you tell me to relax." Despite everything, she laughed. "You really have this all planned out." "I'm a strategist. It's what I do." She should say no. Should keep this professional until after the trial. Should maintain boundaries and distance and all the sensible things that would protect her if this went wrong. But sensible had never been her strong suit where Darian was concerned. "Ask me again," she said quietly. "After the verdict? When this is really over." "I will." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. "That's a promise." They stood there for a moment, hands linked, watching the garden through the window. Outside, the city continued its relentless pace. Inside, for just this moment, everything was still. A knock at the door broke the spell. Darian's secretary appeared, apologetic. "Your Grace, the magistrate's office sent a messenger. They need you both at the courthouse. Something about new evidence." Darian and Elara exchanged glances. "What kind of evidence?" Darian asked. "They didn't say, just that it's urgent." 20 minutes later, they stood in the magistrate's private office, staring at documents that changed everything. "These just surfaced this morning," the magistrate said. He was an older man, silver-haired and sharp-eyed. "Anonymous tip led us to a safety deposit box registered under a false name. Inside were these." The documents were ledgers, years of them, detailing every illegal transaction Adrian had ever made. Names, dates, amounts. A complete record of his criminal empire, meticulously maintained. Why would he keep these? Elara breathed. This is evidence against himself. Insurance, probably, Darian said, scanning the pages. Proof against his business partners if they ever turned on him. He was documenting everyone's crimes to make sure he had leverage. And now we have it, the magistrate said with grim satisfaction. This seals the case. There's no defense against this level of documentation. Your brother is going to prison, Miss Vance, for a very long time. Elara should have felt victorious. This was it. The final nail in Adrian's coffin, irrefutable proof of everything he'd done. Instead, she just felt hollow, tired. How long? She asked. 20 years? Possibly more depending on the final charges. The magistrate's expression softened. I know he's your brother. This can't be easy. He stopped being my brother a long time ago, Elara said quietly. This is justice. It's just final. Darian's hand found the small of her back, a steadying presence, reminding her she wasn't alone. We'll need you both to review these documents, the magistrate continued. Verify what you can. Your testimony combined with this evidence will make the trial a formality. They spent the next 3 hours going through the ledgers. Elara recognized names, transactions, schemes she'd overheard pieces of over the years. Darian corroborated business dealings he'd investigated. By the time they finished, the magistrate looked like he'd won the lottery. This is remarkable, he said. We'll fast-track the trial. No point dragging this out when the outcome is certain. How fast? Darian asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Walking out of the courthouse into afternoon sunlight felt surreal. The world looked the same. Carriages rolling past, vendors calling their wares, people going about their lives. But everything had shifted. In 2 weeks, Adrian would be convicted, sentenced, gone from her life permanently. You okay? Darian asked. Keep asking me that. Because I keep worrying about the answer. Elara stopped walking. Right there on the courthouse steps, with people streaming around them, she turned to face him. I'm not okay, but I will be. And knowing you're here, that I don't have to face this alone, that helps. Something in Darian's expression shifted, softened. Come on, let's get out of here. I know a place with excellent tea and terrible pastries. Very mediocre. Perfect for processing complicated emotions. That sounds perfect. They walked together through the city streets, and for the first time in longer than Elara could remember, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. The tea was indeed terrible, and the pastries somehow worse, but the little shop tucked away on a side street had the kind of anonymity Elara desperately needed. No one recognized them. No one stared. They were just 2 people sitting in a corner booth, nursing lukewarm tea and trying to process the fact that everything was about to change. 20 years, Elara said, staring into her cup. That's half a lifetime. It's what he deserves. Darian broke apart a scone that had the texture of river rock. More, honestly, given what we know. I know, it's just... She struggled to find words. Part of me thought he'd find a way out. He always does. Even now, with all that evidence, I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. The other shoe already dropped. It landed on his head. Multiple times. Darian reached across the table, covering her hand with his. He's done, Elara. Really done. You can stop waiting for disaster. She wanted to believe that. Wanted to flip some internal switch and feel safe, but anxiety didn't work that way. Fear had roots that went deeper than logic. Tell me about the music school, Darian said, changing the subject with the kind of grace that told her he understood. The one you want to open. What would it look like? The question caught her off guard. I never said I wanted to open a school. You said you wanted to teach music, not in secret, not hiding. That sounds like more than just private lessons in a merchant's parlor. He leaned back, studying her. So what would it look like if you could build it however you wanted? Elara's first instinct was to deflect, to say it was just a dream, nothing concrete, too expensive and complicated to pursue seriously. But something about the way Darian was looking at her, genuinely interested, not humoring her, made her pause. Somewhere bright, she said slowly, with big windows and good acoustics. Space for instruments, pianos, strings, maybe brass if we could afford it. Not just for wealthy students, for anyone who wanted to learn. The vision was taking shape as she spoke, becoming real in a way it never had before. A place where music was about joy instead of status, where making mistakes was part of learning instead of something to be ashamed of. That sounds incredible. It also sounds expensive and probably impossible. Why impossible? Because I have no money, no reputation, and no idea how to actually run a business. She laughed, but it came out bitter. I can barely afford my apartment, Darian. Opening a school is fantasy. Not if you have backing. He said it casually, like he was suggesting they order more tea. I could invest. Make it a legitimate business venture. You'd run it. Hire teachers, set curriculum, make all the decisions. I just provide capital and maybe some business guidance. Elara's throat went tight. You can't just... That's too much. Why? I invest in businesses all the time. This one happens to have a mission I believe in and a director I trust. His expression was serious now. I'm not offering charity, Elara. I'm offering partnership. You have the vision and expertise. I have resources. Together we could actually build something meaningful. We barely know each other. We've dismantled a criminal empire together. I'd say that accelerates the getting to know you process. He squeezed her hand. Think about it. That's all I'm asking. Don't dismiss it just because it seems too good. Sometimes good things actually happen. The tea shop door opened, admitting a gust of cold air and a familiar face. Cora swept in, spotted them immediately, and made a beeline for their table. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. She pulled up a chair without waiting for invitation. The Thornwick Gossip Network is on fire. Apparently Adrian's ledgers are being discussed in every drawing room in the city. Mother's beside herself, half horrified, half thrilled to be tangentially connected to the scandal of the century. How did people find out so fast? Elara asked. You're joking, right? The magistrate's secretary has a cousin who works for the Hartley family. By noon, everyone who mattered knew that Adrian Vance kept a detailed record of every crime he'd ever committed. Cora accepted the tea Darian poured for her. Also, society has decided you're a hero, the disgraced noblewoman who brought down her corrupt brother. Very romantic. There's already talk of invitations. Elara's stomach dropped. Invitations to what? Balls, parties, salons. All the events that blacklisted you 5 years ago are suddenly desperate to have you attend. Cora's smile was sharp. Funny how moral outrage becomes admiration when the story changes. I don't want their invitations. Good. Because most of them are terrible people throwing boring parties. Cora leaned forward conspiratorially. But there are a few you might actually enjoy. Lady Pemberton, yes, that Pemberton, whose husband was involved in Adrian's schemes, is hosting a charity auction next month. Proceeds go to orphanages and schools. She specifically asked if you'd attend. Said something about wanting to support women who stand up to powerful men. Elara didn't know how to finish that sentence. A month ago, she'd been invisible. Now people were asking for her at charity events. Overwhelming, Darian supplied. The word you're looking for is overwhelming. Exactly that. You don't have to go, Cora said. I'm just telling you the option exists. Society's memory is short, but their fascination with redemption stories is endless. If you wanted back in, on your own terms this time, doors are opening. Did she want back in? Elara had spent 5 years telling herself she was better off outside society's spotlight, that the quiet life was what she wanted, but maybe that had been survival talking. Maybe given an actual choice, not exile, but genuine freedom to decide, the answer would be different. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking. Cora glanced between them, clearly noticing their linked hands across the table. Am I interrupting something? Strategy meeting, Darian said smoothly. Is that what we're calling it now? But Cora's smile was warm, approving. Well, don't let me stop your very important strategic hand-holding. I just wanted to deliver the gossip and make sure Elara hadn't done anything dramatic like flee the country. Not yet, Elara said. Give it a few more days. Cora left as quickly as she'd arrived, taking the autumn wind with her. The shop settled back into quiet conversation and the clink of teacups. Elara stared at her reflection in the window, a woman who looked tired but no longer hunted, someone who was starting to believe she might actually have a future. The trial's in 2 weeks, she said quietly. After that, I'll have to decide what I want, where I go, who I... She stopped, the words catching. Who you spend your time with, Darian finished. That's a decision I'm very interested in hearing. You're not subtle. I stopped trying to be subtle the moment I kissed you outside a tavern. He pulled his hand back, giving her space. But I meant what I said. After the trial, when everything settles, we'll have that conversation. Until then, let's just focus on making sure your brother gets exactly what he deserves. The 2 weeks before the trial passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Elara gave 3 more depositions to the magistrate, reviewed documents until her eyes burned, practiced her testimony with Darian and a lawyer he'd hired to help coach witnesses. Don't volunteer information, the lawyer said. Answer exactly what's asked. Stay calm. If Adrian's attorney tries to provoke you, don't take the bait. What if he claims I was part of his schemes? Elara asked. What if he tries to implicate me? He won't. He's too smart for that. Making you a villain undermines his defense that he was unfairly targeted. The lawyer shuffled papers. But if he does, we have your 5-year exile. Your complete separation from his business. The fact that you're the one who helped expose him. No jury will believe you were complicit. The night before the trial, Elara couldn't sleep. She paced her room at Thornwick. She'd been staying there since Adrian's arrest, unable to face returning to her small apartment, and tried to prepare for seeing her brother again. In court, under oath, with the whole city watching. A soft knock interrupted her pacing. Cora stuck her head in. Thought you might be awake, she said. Brought reinforcements. She held up a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. They sat on the floor by the fireplace, passing the bottle back and forth because pouring seemed like too much effort. Are you scared? Cora asked. Terrified. Good. That means you're smart. Cora took a long drink. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. Most people would have stayed hidden. Let Adrian continue destroying lives because fighting back was too risky. I didn't have a choice. You always had a choice. You chose to warn Darian. Chose to forge documents, chose to walk into that club knowing Adrian might see through everything. Cora bumped her shoulder. You chose courage every single time. That's not nothing. Elara's eyes stung. What if I can't do it tomorrow? What if I get up there and freeze? Then you freeze for a minute, remember why you're doing this, and find your voice again. Cora's expression was fierce. You've survived worse than a courtroom. You'll survive this too. They finished the wine in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Eventually, Cora fell asleep on the floor, snoring softly. Elara covered her with a blanket and finally managed a few hours of rest herself. Dawn came too fast. The courthouse was packed. Every seat in the gallery filled with nobles, merchants, journalists documenting what was already being called the trial of the decade. Elara sat in the witness section with Marcus Thorne, who gave her an encouraging nod. His shoulder had healed well enough that he could wear a proper coat, though she noticed he still favored the arm. Darian sat 3 rows back, catching her eye and mouthing, "You've got this." Then they brought Adrian in. He looked smaller somehow. Prison gray didn't suit him the way his expensive coats had. His hair was unkempt, his face drawn, but his eyes, those were the same, sharp, calculating. And when they landed on Elara, she saw the flash of rage he was working hard to contain. The trial began with opening statements. Adrian's lawyer painted him as a misunderstood businessman, a victim of jealous competitors who'd fabricated evidence. The prosecution laid out the mountain of proof, the ledgers, the witness testimony, the documented crimes spanning years. Then came the witnesses. Marcus went first, describing the shooting in clinical detail. The defense tried to suggest he'd been caught in crossfire, that Adrian had nothing to do with the thugs who'd attacked him. But Marcus held firm, identifying one of the men in custody as his shooter and confirming he'd heard them mention working for Vance. One of Adrian's former business partners testified next, detailing fraud schemes in exchange for immunity. Then another, then a government official who admitted taking bribes to overlook illegal transactions. The prosecution was building a wall of evidence, brick by brick, and Adrian's lawyer was running out of ways to tear it down. The prosecution calls Elara Vance. Her legs felt like water as she stood. The walk to the witness stand lasted forever and no time at all. The bailiff swore her in. She sat down, gripping the rail to keep her hands from shaking. The prosecutor was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a voice like steel. Miss Vance, please state your relationship to the defendant. He's my brother. And when did you last live under the same roof as Adrian Vance? 5 years ago, before he orchestrated a scandal that forced me into exile. Adrian's lawyer objected. The judge sustained it. The prosecutor rephrased. For the next hour, Elara laid out everything: the forged letter scandal, Adrian's threats, his coercion to spy on Darian, the way he'd built an empire on manipulation and fear. She spoke slowly, clearly, keeping her voice steady even when her hands shook. Adrian's lawyer cross-examined, trying to paint her as a vengeful sister with an axe to grind. Isn't it true you were angry about your exile? That you wanted revenge? I wanted him to stop hurting people. But you admit you were angry. Yes. I was angry that my brother destroyed my reputation to consolidate power. I was angry that he threatened my friends. I was angry that he operated without consequences while people suffered. She met the lawyer's eyes. Anger doesn't make my testimony false. It makes it personal. The lawyer tried several more angles, but Elara had practiced this. She didn't take the bait, didn't volunteer information, just answered what was asked and let the evidence speak. When she stepped down, her legs were shaking so badly she nearly fell. Darian was waiting near the courtroom doors. He didn't say anything, just pulled her into a quiet alcove and let her breathe. You did perfectly, he said quietly. I thought I was going to throw up. You didn't. That's what matters. The trial continued for 3 more days. More witnesses, more evidence. The ledgers were entered into record, page after page of documented crimes. Adrian's lawyer tried to argue they were fabricated, but handwriting experts confirmed they were genuine. Financial analysts verified the transactions. The wall became unassailable. On the 4th day, closing arguments began. Adrian's lawyer made an impassioned speech about rush to judgment and circumstantial evidence. The prosecution methodically dismantled every defense, pointing to the mountain of proof that left no room for reasonable doubt. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Elara spent those hours in a private room with Cora and Darian, unable to sit still, unable to think about anything except 12 strangers deciding her brother's fate. What if they acquit him? She said for the 100th time. They won't, Darian said for the 100th time. But if they do, Elara, Cora grabbed her shoulders. Stop! You're spiraling. The evidence is overwhelming. The testimony was solid. He's going to be convicted. You can't know that. Yes, I can. Because I was in that courtroom. I saw the jury's faces when they entered those ledgers. They know he's guilty. A bailiff knocked on the door. Juries reached a verdict. The walk back to the courtroom felt like moving through water. Everything was too loud, too bright, too real. Elara slid into her seat, Darian's hand finding hers under the rail. Across the aisle, Adrian sat rigid, his lawyer whispering last-minute reassurances. The jury filed in. Elara tried to read their expressions, but they were carefully blank. Has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked. We have, Your Honor. The 4 women stood, holding a piece of paper. Elara's heart was trying to break through her ribs. The entire courtroom held its breath. On the charge of kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty. Adrian's lawyer started to object. The judge silenced him. On the charge of assault, we find the defendant guilty. Elara's vision blurred. On the charge of fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of extortion, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. The 4 women continued through all 17 charges. Guilty. 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 Adrian's face had gone white. His lawyer was already calling for appeal, but the judge was banging his gavel, calling for order, and the reality was settling over the courtroom like snow. Adrian Vance was convicted on all counts. Sentencing would come later, but the outcome was already clear: 20 years minimum, possibly life given the scope of his crimes. He'd lost everything. Elara sat frozen as chaos erupted around her. Journalists rushing to file stories, spectators talking in excited whispers, Adrian being led away in chains, his eyes finding hers one last time. She expected rage, hatred, promises of revenge. Instead, he just looked broken. Then he was gone, and she was still sitting there, unable to move, unable to process that it was actually over. Elara, Darian's voice cut through the fog. Come on, let's get you out of here. He guided her through the crowd, Cora clearing a path ahead. They made it outside into cold afternoon air, and Elara sucked in a breath that turned into a sob she'd been holding back for days. "It's done," she managed. "It's actually done. It's done," Darian confirmed, pulling her into his arms right there on the courthouse steps. She cried into his coat, while Cora ran interference with journalists and curious onlookers. Cried from relief and exhaustion, and the weight of 5 years of fear finally lifting. When she pulled back, her face was a mess, but Darian was smiling at her like she'd just won a war. "Terrible pastries?" he suggested. "Our usual place?" Despite everything, Elara laughed. "That sounds perfect." The tea shop became their refuge over the next week, while the city processed the verdict. Adrian's sentencing was set for a month out, but the outcome was no longer in question. His empire was being dismantled, assets seized, business partners scrambling to distance themselves, and Elara was being invited everywhere. "Lady Pemberton's charity auction," Cora said, reviewing a stack of invitations that had arrived that morning. "The Thornwood Society wants you to speak about standing up to corruption. 3 different families want to hire you as a music tutor for their daughters, with very generous compensation, I should add." "This is insane," Elara said, staring at the pile. "A month ago, I was teaching merchant children in a drafty parlor. Now duchesses want me to educate their daughters? You brought down Adrian Vance. That makes you interesting." Cora grinned. "And possibly dangerous, which makes you fascinating. Society loves a good redemption story, especially when it comes with drama and handsome dukes." Darian looked up from his newspaper. "I'm handsome now?" "You were always handsome. That's not news." Cora waved him off. "The news is that you two are being talked about, together, extensively. Lady Hartley's betting book has odds on when you'll announce a courtship." "People are betting on us?" Elara's face heated. "People bet on everything. Don't take it personally." Cora sorted through more invitations. "But you should know that your reputation has completely transformed. You're not the disgraced Vance sister anymore. You're Elara Vance, the woman who exposed corruption and saved a duke. Very romantic. Very marketable if you wanted to use it." "I don't want to use it." "Then don't. But don't hide from it either." Cora's expression turned serious. "You have options now. Real ones. What do you want to do with them?" The question hung in the air. What did she want? A month ago, the answer would have been safety, invisibility, freedom from fear. Now? "I want to build something," Elara said slowly. "Something that lasts longer than scandal or gossip. Something real." Darian set down his newspaper. "The music school. Maybe, if the offer still stands." "It stands. It'll always stand." He leaned forward. "But I have another proposal. Well, 2 proposals, actually." "I'm listening." "First, and this is purely business, I think we should formalize our partnership. You run the school. I provide funding and business infrastructure. We draw up actual contracts, make it official, build something that outlasts both of us." He paused. "Sound interesting?" "Very. What's the second proposal?" Darian's expression shifted, became less businesslike and more vulnerable in a way that made Elara's breath catch. "The second proposal is personal, and it involves that dinner I promised you. Tomorrow night. Somewhere nice. Just us. No crisis management, no strategy sessions. Just seeing if this thing between us is real or just adrenaline from surviving impossible situations together." Cora was grinning like she'd won a lottery. Elara ignored her, focusing on Darian. "You think it might just be adrenaline?" she asked. "No, but I want to make sure you don't." His voice was steady, but his eyes were uncertain. "You've been through hell. Your brother's convicted but not sentenced. Your whole life is in transition. I don't want you to say yes to something because you're grateful or because I was there when everything fell apart. I want you to say yes because you actually want this. Want me." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. "What if I already know the answer?" "Then humor me. Let me take you to dinner like a normal person courting someone he cares about. Let us have one evening that isn't built on crisis." He smiled. "Besides, I've been planning this for weeks. I'd hate to waste good reservations." "You're impossible." "Is that a yes?" Elara looked at him. Really looked at him. The Duke who'd turned his kidnapping into evidence gathering, who'd offered to fund her dreams before they'd even defined what they were to each other, who'd stood beside her through a trial that could have destroyed them both and never once suggested she was too much trouble. "Yes," she said. "It's a yes." Cora actually squealed. "Finally. Do you know how painful it's been watching you two dance around this for weeks? I was ready to lock you in a room until you figured it out." "We did figure it out," Darian said mildly. "Just took some time." "Some time? You kissed outside a tavern and then proceeded to have the longest courtship in history via witness preparation and legal documents. We were busy dismantling a criminal empire. Details." Cora stood, gathering her invitations. "I'm leaving before this gets any more sickeningly romantic." "Elara, I expect a full report tomorrow night. Darian, don't mess this up. I like you, but I like her more, and I will make your life difficult if you break her heart." "Noted," Darian said seriously. After Cora left, the tea shop felt quieter, more intimate. Elara stared at her cold tea, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with trials or brothers or past trauma. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Of dinner? Of all of it. The school, the invitations, this." She gestured between them. "What if I'm terrible at having a normal life? I've spent so long in survival mode that I don't know how to just exist." Darian reached across the table, taking both her hands. "Then we'll figure it out together. Make mistakes. Learn as we go. There's no rule book for rebuilding your life after everything you've been through." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "But I'll tell you what I know. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You walked into a ballroom to save a stranger. You stood up to your brother when it would have been easier to stay silent. You testified in court knowing the whole city was watching. If you can do all that, you can definitely handle a dinner date and building a music school." When you put it that way, it sounds almost manageable. That's because it is. You just have to believe it. The next evening, Elara stood in front of her borrowed mirror at Thornwick, trying to decide if the green dress was too much. Cora had lent it to her, silk that caught the light, with a neckline that was elegant without being scandalous. "You look beautiful," Cora said from the doorway. "Stop fussing." "I'm not fussing." "You've adjusted that necklace 6 times in the last minute. That's fussing." Cora came closer, fixing a stray curl. "He's going to be speechless." "That's what I'm afraid of." "Good speechless. Not terrified speechless." A knock echoed from downstairs. Elara's heart jumped into her throat. "That's him," Cora said unnecessarily. "Go. Have a wonderful evening. Make good choices, or bad ones. I'm not your mother." Elara walked downstairs on shaking legs. Darian waited in the foyer, looking unfairly handsome in evening clothes that fit him perfectly. When he saw her, his expression did something complicated that made her forget how to breathe. "You look—" He stopped, searching for words. "I was going to say beautiful, but that feels inadequate. I'll take it anyway." He offered his arm. "Shall we?" The restaurant was exactly what he'd promised. Nice without being overwhelming. Private corner table, candlelight. A menu that didn't require advanced degrees to understand. They ordered wine and food they barely tasted. Too busy talking. "Tell me about your favorite music," Darian said. "To play or to listen to?" "Both." So she did. Talked about piano compositions that made her cry. The way violin could convey emotion words couldn't touch. Her students who struggled with rhythm but kept trying anyway because they loved it. He listened like every word mattered, asking questions, drawing out details. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me something I don't know, something that isn't business or strategy." Darian was quiet for a moment, considering. "I'm afraid of horses." Elara blinked. "You rode one during the hunt, and when you escaped kidnapping." "I know. Doesn't mean I'm not terrified every time I get on one." He smiled ruefully. "Fell off when I was 7. Broke my arm. Never quite got over it. But admitting that as a duke feels like admitting weakness, so I just keep doing it anyway." "That's either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both." They talked until the restaurant was closing, the staff politely hinting they needed to leave. Darian walked her back to Thornwick through lamplight streets, their hands linked, conversation flowing easy and natural. At the manor gates, he stopped. "I should let you go. It's late." "Probably." Neither of them moved. "Thank you," Elara said quietly. "For tonight." for everything, for being exactly who you are. Same to you. He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. Can I see you tomorrow? We have a business meeting scheduled, contract discussion for the school. I meant outside of business. Her smile felt like it might split her face. Then yes, you can see me tomorrow and the day after. And she stopped, suddenly shy. And? He prompted. And as many days as you want, for as long as you want. Darian's expression went soft and fierce at the same time. That might be a very long time. Good. He kissed her then, slow and sweet and nothing like the desperate kiss outside the tavern. This was deliberate, a promise, a choice they were both making with clear eyes and open hearts. When they pulled apart, Elara was grinning. Still think it might just be adrenaline? Definitely not adrenaline. Good, because I'm not very interested in second-guessing this anymore. Me either. They stood there for another few minutes, reluctant to end the evening. Finally, Darian stepped back. Good night, Elara. Good night, Darian. She watched him walk away, then floated inside to find Cora waiting with a knowing smile and too many questions. But Elara answered every one, because for the first time in years, talking about her future felt like joy instead of fear. Adrian's sentencing came 3 weeks later. Elara attended, sitting in the gallery with Darian on one side and Cora on the other. Her brother looked smaller every time she saw him. Prison had stripped away the charm, the confidence, the aura of invincibility. The judge was thorough and merciless. 25 years. No possibility of parole for 15. Restitution to victims. Permanent forfeiture of all assets used in criminal enterprises. Adrian didn't look at her as they led him away. Didn't speak. Just disappeared into the system that would hold him for the rest of his viable life. Elara felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense of finality. It's over, she said to Darian as they left the courthouse. It's over, he confirmed. How do you feel? Free? The word surprised her with its truth. Free. Not happy or sad or angry, just free. The weight she'd carried for 5 years, the fear, the shame, the constant looking over her shoulder, was gone. Lifted. Done. What now? Cora asked. Elara thought about it. The music school contracts were signed. She'd accepted Lady Pemberton's invitation to the charity auction. She had dinner plans with Darian tomorrow and a future that no longer felt like a threat. Now, she said, I build something beautiful. 6 months later, the Vance School of Music opened its doors. It occupied a renovated townhouse near the Merchant District, 3 stories of bright practice rooms, a performance hall, a library of sheet music. The sign outside was simple, elegant script on a brass plaque that caught the morning sun. Elara stood in the entrance hall, watching students arrive for the first day. Merchant children and noble offspring mixing together, beginners clutching instruments carefully, advanced students chatting about technique. Exactly what she'd envisioned. Nervous? Darian asked, appearing beside her with coffee. Terrified. What if no one learns anything? What if the curriculum is wrong? What if it's exactly what the city needs and you're brilliant at it? He handed her the coffee. Stop catastrophizing. You've prepared for months. You hired excellent teachers. The students are excited. It's going to be wonderful. Elara took a sip, letting the warmth steady her. Did you always believe in me this much? Or is this a recent development? I believed in you the moment you warned me about Iron Ridge. Everything since has just been confirmation. A student approached, a young girl clutching a violin case. Miss Vance, I'm Anna. I'm supposed to be in your beginning strings class? You are. Room 3, second floor. Head up and get settled. We'll start in 10 minutes. The girl scurried off. More students followed. The building filled with voices, footsteps, the tentative sound of instruments being tuned. Cora appeared in the doorway, breathless. Sorry I'm late. Mother needed help with... She stopped, looking around. Elara, this is incredible. It's chaotic. It's alive. There's a difference. Cora linked their arms. Come on. I want to see everything before your first class starts. They toured the building, Elara pointing out features, Cora exclaiming over details. The performance hall had excellent acoustics. The library was already stocked with donated music. The practice rooms had thick walls so students wouldn't disturb each other. By the time the first class started, Elara had moved from terrified to cautiously excited. She stood in front of 15 students ranging from age 8 to 16, all watching her with varying degrees of interest and nerves. "Welcome," she said. "I'm Elara Vance, and this is Beginning Strings. How many of you have never touched a violin before?" 8 hands went up. Perfect. Then we're all starting from the same place. This class isn't about being perfect. It's not about impressing anyone. It's about learning to make music and enjoying the process. She picked up her own violin. "Let me show you something. This is what professional violin sounds like." She played a short piece, something beautiful and complex that made the students' eyes widen. "And this," she continued, deliberately playing a screeching, awful sound, "is what learning sounds like. Both are important. Both are part of the journey, so don't be afraid to sound terrible. That's how you get to sound beautiful." The students laughed, the tension broke, and for the next hour, Elara taught them how to hold a bow, how to stand, how to produce their first painful notes. It was messy and loud and occasionally painful to listen to. It was perfect. After the last class ended, Elara collapsed in her office, a small room overlooking the garden. Darian found her there, feet propped on the desk, grinning at the ceiling. "Successful first day?" he asked. "Exhausting first day, but yes, successful." She looked at him. "Thank you for making this possible, for believing it could work. You made it possible. I just provided funding." He sat on the edge of her desk. "Speaking of which, we should discuss expansion plans. It's been 1 day, and you already have a waiting list of 40 students. We'll need more teachers by next term. Maybe another building eventually." His eyes were bright with the same enthusiasm she was feeling. This could become something really significant, Elara. Not just a school, a movement, accessible music education for anyone who wants it. You're getting ahead of yourself. "I'm a strategist. It's what I do." He leaned down, kissed her softly. "But we can discuss expansion plans later. Right now, we should celebrate. I made reservations at that place you liked." "The one with the terrible pastries?" "They've improved, actually. I've been coaching the owner." Elara laughed, pulling him down for another kiss. "You're ridiculous. You love it." "I love you," she corrected, and watched his expression transform. "Say that again." "I love you, even when you're being ridiculous and planning expansions on day 1 and coaching pastry shop owners." Darian's smile was incandescent. "I love you too, even when you're catastrophizing and second-guessing yourself and teaching students to make deliberately terrible sounds." They stayed like that for a moment, wrapped up in each other, the school settling into quiet around them. Through the window, Elara could see the garden where students would practice when weather allowed. Could imagine concerts and recitals and years of growth. Her whole life, she'd defined herself by what she'd lost. Her reputation, her family, her place in society. Now she was choosing what to build instead. A school that made music accessible. A relationship built on choice instead of necessity. A future that looked nothing like what she'd planned, but everything like what she wanted. "Ready for dinner?" Darian asked. Elara stood, taking his offered hand. "Ready for everything." They walked out together into the evening, leaving the school locked behind them, but never really leaving it at all. It would be there tomorrow, full of students and sound and possibility, just like her life. Full of people she'd chosen and who'd chosen her back. Full of music and laughter and love. Full of futures she was finally brave enough to claim. Not because bloodlines or titles or society said she deserved them, but because she'd fought for them. Had stood up when staying silent would have been easier. Had built something real from the ruins of what had been destroyed. She'd warned a stranger at a masked ball, and in saving him, had saved herself. Not a perfect ending. Real life never was. But a true one. And in Elara Vance's new life, truth mattered more than perfection, always.